Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 8th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Do we have roll call, Shannon, please?
Messina.
Here.
Fleming. Here. Ingalls.
Here.
Lutrip.
Here.
Mandel. McCracken. Here. Ward.
Here.
Okay, thank you. If we can please stand and join us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well, I see that we have something called elections on our here, which for the chair and the vice chair. So, Hillary, you want to tell us what we should do about that one?
Something, it's required, it's in March, it's your meeting, and you do the elections, and so you can do them either individually or if there's a slate of candidates that someone wants to nominate, and then it'll be voted upon.
And we vote on it.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioners? Go ahead, Peter.
Mr. Chair, I would like to move that we appoint Mr. Messina as our chair and John Ingalls as our assistant chair, continuing on with what we've had.
I'll second that.
Very good. First and second. Do we need a roll call or just a simple motion?
Like simple motion, it's fine.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Okay. Opposed? None? So, thank you. Appreciate it.
See how you feel later tonight.
I have approval of minutes, February 8th, 2022.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make, I don't know if it's a change or there was an omission to the minutes, and that is the very
page?
last sentence in the
What page
minutes.
you on now?
I'm on page 7.
Okay.
This is after we had our dialogue from each commission member, which I thought was excellent. And that was what I was trying to capture here, and I did. I concurred with all the comments made by the commissioners' comments, not all comments in the minutes, the comments of the commissioners. That it was very significant to me because other comments were all over the place, but the commissioners' comments were right on point. And so with that, I would move that we put all commissioners, add the word commissioners in comments.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you. With that said, can
I'll
get a...
second.
All right. Have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. At this time, we public comment, and that's anything that isn't on our agenda tonight. So if anyone wants to come on up to the podium and address the commission or staff, I see no running doing that. Staff comments?
All right, good evening, commissioners. So at our meeting in April, there will be 2 public hearings. There's one that's kind of a multi-part request, annexation with a planned unit development subdivision and a zone change request. And for that meeting, we will begin using the new comprehensive plan. As you'll note, the items this evening, we're using the older comp plan because when the applications were submitted, the due date for submittal was prior to the hearings on the comprehensive plan. So that was the most fair way to process those. So wanted to note that. Also, the Regional Housing and Growth Issues Partnership is continuing to meet and make some progress. We're looking at different tools for housing options and workforce and essential professional housing in the community. There will be a presentation of the City Council next week, and then we'll be scheduling one before the Planning Commission. So you'll be able to kind of hear some of the issues, the results out of the housing needs assessment, and some of the efforts that are being done. There's a new website for that effort. It has moved. It was previously being hosted by KMPO, Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization. It now has its own website, which is rhgip.com. So that stands for Regional Housing and Growth Issues Partnership.com. So please take a look at that. It has all of the agendas and recordings of the meetings, FAQs and other resources and information, as well as the members of the working group, the advisory committee, and then the committees that are being formed and making some progress. So
Okay.
good things
Great.
happening.
Thank you. Appreciate that. At this time, any commissioner comments? I just make a comment. We had a couple of hearings, City Council and this commission on our comp plan, and it was interesting. I just want to thank everyone that participated, regardless of what your personal view was. The participation in these meetings is very important, and I just hope that in the future, that it's somewhat a little bit more civil than it was, and not so much as accusing that some comments were, and also that you're more than welcome to make comments, but I ask that you perhaps do some prior research to coming up to the podium sometime and try to get all the facts that are needed to, when you make comments, so that, there's construction criticism. And if you do have questions, you can certainly ask staff prior to meetings, and, the city's always open to public comment, but we always want to get that comment and so that it's correct. And we're not sitting here arguing back and forth, and that's kind of my comment on that. And also, on the sign-up sheets now, when you do sign up, we are asking for of course, your name, your address, and the city you live in. That's kind of the regulations that we need to do. And if Hillary, you want to kind of touch on that? And
Sure.
some of the procedures now that we're going to be doing and putting in place in view of our recent meetings that we just had.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to clarify, so the state has requirements for public hearings, and so we are required to have a legal name and an address provided on the sign-up sheet, as well as a city of residence. Now, when someone comes to the podium, they don't have to state their full address, because obviously there's some privacy concerns, but we do need that documentation. When they come to the podium, they need to state their name and then the city of the residence, and then you'll have them swear or affirm that they'll be telling the truth for their testimony. And that's for the public hearings. For the public comment, they still would need to provide their name and their city of residence as well.
And as far as when we do swear them in, if someone doesn't want to give their name or their address or any of the state requirements, what happens from that point?
They're not allowed to testify at that point.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. We're always learning new things, I think, so.
But can they put it on the sign-up sheet, their name and address, but then come up here and refuse to give their name?
Well, they can, but they won't be able to testify.
Okay, so they have to sign up the sheet and?
Correct.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, when I see the sign-up sheet, if the address isn't there, I'll ask for an address and stuff, and if they don't, I guess they won't be able to testify. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so the first item we have, Mike, you can give us a presentation. It is a request for an additional 334 parking stalls and landscape plan at 355 East Snyder Avenue.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
This is administrative item LS-1-22. Applicant is Barghausen Consulting Engineering, and the owner's Costco. They're requesting approval for the amount and spacing of parking lot landscaping for a 4.48 acre parcel with 335 parking spaces for the proposed Costco parking lot expansion at 355 East Snyder Avenue. This application is coming forward because it triggers Planning Commission review after 300 spaces. So the two items that you'll be looking at is the amount of parking lot landscaping and the spacing between the landscaping areas. So here's an aerial photograph of the full Costco site. But today, we're just looking at this particular area right here. This is the former Black Sheep facility. The applicant is proposing to remove this building and add additional parking spaces. Here's a view of those, how those will be overlaid over that area with the landscaping provided. The applicant, here's the overall site plan showing how the landscaping will interact with the whole site. And the applicant has submitted a landscaping plan specifically for that area, indicating the type of vegetation, the trees, the shrubs, and the amount. And the requirements per city code is required 12.7% of the landscape area in square feet. That's 8,577 square feet, and it requires 29 parking lot trees. The applicant has provided 15.8% landscaping with a total of 61 trees. In summary, the amount of environmental landscaping that is required is 8,577 square feet, and the applicant is providing 10,693 square feet. The percent of area to be landscaped is 12.7, and the applicant is providing 15.8. The maximum distance allowed between any parking stall and a landscape area is 100 feet, and the applicant is providing a maximum distance of 50 feet. The minimum amount of parking lot trees that is required is 29, and the applicant is providing 61. The Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make a simple motion to approve, deny, or continue the item for further study. Findings are not required. The applicant is also here to answer any questions that you may have.
You getting that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Having a thought on something else.
Okay.
Any questions of Mike? I apologize.
John wants to say something.
Hey, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So this isn't a public hearing per se, correct?
That is correct.
It's an administrative item.
Just administrative item.
And am I correct that this is kind of a very narrow kind of scope here? It's does the amount of landscaping proposed meet the minimum? And is the distance that I'm seeing with the trees and whatnot meet the minimums?
That is correct. It's just those two standards.
So it's very limited in scope. We had some comment, even though it's not a public hearing, someone commented by email about an entrance somewhere else into Costco, and that's really not on the table tonight, is it?
That is not, but we have forwarded those comments onto the applicant, and they are going to look at that issue and see if there's any recommendations that
So
they can
you're,
make.
you're at least sharing them, and,
Yeah.
and they could digest that a little bit, so.
That's right.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Peter.
Two questions, follow up on John. The city has no authority then within a private property like this on traffic and movement and so forth, like they do in streets. Is that correct?
It's just as far as the entrances, whether connecting to the street, and sometimes traffic, when a parking lot is designed, we can look at that and see if that's flowing with the right amount of width and stuff like that. But as far as exiting and entrances, those are approved prior to.
Well, I don't approval as much as, does the city engineer have any responsibility in that area?
Not on the private property. The city engineer does not review on the private property.
Secondly, and probably more importantly, I see Mr. Monty here, McCauley. Did the urban forestry group go through and look at these trees and give their blessing on the trees? I think the city has some tree standards and whatnot.
As far as street trees are concerned, the urban forester will review this at site plan, and if there's any inconsistencies, they'll make them aware of it.
So they took no exception with this.
That's right.
Thank you.
You had some questions? Go ahead, Phil.
Did you want?
Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of quick things, Mike. I understand the landscaping exceeds the requirement. Does it for the entire site or just for the expansion area?
We're focused just on this expansion area, but the site met the minimum requirements when the Costco facility was built at that
Okay,
time.
fine. Just a couple, and I know there's not much we can do about it. The distribution of the landscaping is up to them, I guess, but it would have been nice a little more along Government Way. That is our main thoroughfare into town. They could beef it up there. I'd be more concerned about that than the extra 3% they're throwing in. The only other thing is, if you're parking in what was the old Black Sheep parking area, it's like a football field length away from the building. And if you got a grocery cart and a couple of kids and you have to push, and there's no pedestrian walkways through there at all, unless that line shown at the bottom row of parking right there, is that a
There is a
actual
pedestrian
walkway all the way
Action
to
this
the
way,
door?
yeah.
And that is the only one,
Yeah, they
right?
would still have to cross this.
Yeah,
this
that's kind of a
driveway area,
hassle.
but
I
yes.
think if they could do a little better on that, it'd be great, but, some things we can do, some things we can't.
Okay, Sarah, you had some questions?
Yeah, I guess I had a similar comment about the pedestrian walkway and then the approaches onto Government Way and or Niter. Since they're not expanding the footprint of their store, they met the requirements when that was built, and those won't really be addressed?
The entrances won't be addressed at this time. It's just specifically those two issues with the landscaping.
Okay.
Okay.
So I would motion, the two items that are really the scope of this is the amount of landscaping and the distance that we see. And the amount of landscaping at 15.8% exceeds the requirement at 12.7. And all the landscaping is well within the maximum distance. So with that, I would motion we approve this.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion to approve. I just
I'll
need-
second.
Second. We don't have a roll call on this, Hillary, or is this, okay,
Simple motion.
okay. Have first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Next item is the applicant Ignite CDA, and it's a modification to the Atlas Waterfront Development PUD. It's PUD-4-19M. And Hillary's going to give us an update.
Yes. I
Thank you.
will.
Thanks, John.
Okay, great. So I'll be covering the Atlas Waterfront PUD number 3. So applicant is Ignite CDA, and the project engineer is Phil Boyd with Welch Comer, and both of them are here this evening. We have Tony Burns with Ignite CDA. The development request is approval of amendments to the planned unit development, including development area 20, and I'll show you on the map where that is. That's generally where the Mount Hink area is, and to make minor modifications to the development standards as noted in the attachment 1 of your staff report. And let's see if I can get this to minimize. There we go. I'll just explain a little bit more about what that entails. In the staff report, there's a PUD amendment on the first page, and so it would be to revise the final development standards for the project to include development area 20 and make some slight changes to the standards for the development areas to respond to market conditions and phases 1 and 2 of the project, and also to provide clarification for development areas within phase 3. The addition of area 20 allows the option for additional housing in the project responding to community needs. The amendment includes the requirement for pocket parks, clarification on commercial and retail spaces, and urban street forms, and additional dwelling types. It also provides for conditional height increases in areas 5A and 13 if public benefits can be achieved to the satisfaction of Ignite CDA. So location is the area you're all very familiar with, I hope at this point. So it's approximately 64 acres located on the south of Celtice Way. It's west of Riverstone, east of River's Edge, and it's on the north bank of Spokane River. We met all legal noticing requirements. Here's a location map showing the subject property with the River's Edge to the west and Riverstone to the east. Here's an aerial photo outlining the subject property. This includes the triangle property that was acquired and included in PUD Amendment number 2. And then area 20 is now within this area that we call Mount Hink. Here's some photos just showing the property with the improvements, the public beach here and some of the parkland. This is looking downriver with the trail. And this is the park site of Mount Hink here, and then you have kind of the bulk of the project there. Area 6 is in this location. And then here's another one looking upriver toward the lake, and so you can see the park here in more detail, area 6 in this area, and then we have area 13 in this location. Here's a revised illustrative site plan, and so this shows how this area 20 has been incorporated in with areas 7 and 11 as well to allow for different housing product types. And that will knock down that Mount Hink area that we've seen growing as we're working through some of the soils on the site. And here is a revised development areas key plan that does show those new areas and kind of the boundaries of each of those. This is also a revised phasing plan. So as we've been working through the development process with Ignite CDA, we've been working on the request for proposals and kind of the development disposition of the land. And so this shows there's 3 phases that are anticipated at this point. Right now we're in this phase 2, and so there's an RFP out right now for this area. And then phase 3 would be this on the northeast side. So I'm going to quickly go through this overview of changes, and then if there's questions later, I would be happy to respond to them more specifically, as well as Phil Boyd or Tony. So just quickly on the first areas 1 and 2, in working through some of the site development plans and the building permits, we realized that we needed to modify the site setback slightly. There's the flat work associated with the porch area and the street wall and the stairs that are kind of right by the right-of-way, and that's different than the porch setback where the columns are and the house projection and all of that. And so we wanted to clarify that those are kind of 2 different things, but we wanted to allow for and make sure it was very clear on the corner lots that they would still have to meet the vision triangle, so we wouldn't be blocking any vision issues and creating a traffic hazard. So that's that one. I have an exhibit that's included in your packet showing here kind of what we're looking at for the difference between the porch post setback versus kind of the edge of that flat work and the street wall, kind of the retaining wall. And then here's on this side view to kind of look at the porch posts, how those are allowed to wrap around as long as we maintain the site triangle. And here's some photos just kind of further showing what that looks like. And so here's an example of how the porch setback would be measured here versus at this point. So the street wall would be able to be a little bit closer to the right-of-way, but still maintain this area for the landscaping behind the sidewalk and allow for the steps to come out. So on this one, it's changes to areas 3 and 4 slightly to allow for the lot depths to be a little bit shorter. We realized, or the developer did as they were kind of working through the design, that they couldn't quite achieve that 80 feet, so they had to get to 76 feet for these particular lots for townhouses. And then we're also, through their proposal for areas 3 and 4, they have added pocket parks, so we wanted to codify that kind of and put it into the development standards so that we will be able to ensure that we do get these 2 pocket parks for the project. So in area 3, there's also a request to increase the height from 40 feet to 45 feet. There's some grade changes and some issues that make it difficult to achieve that, and so that would also be the same height as allowed in area 4. It's the same developer, so it makes sense to have the same height allowable in both areas. And then there are some conditional height increase requests. So there's one in area 5A and one in 13 that I'll speak to as well, but it would only be allowed if Ignite CDA could work through with the developer and find some public benefit. If not, it would be capped at 45 feet. So we didn't want to just outright say we're increasing it to 60 feet in 5A, and also in portion of 13, there has to be some benefit, and so I can speak to that a little bit more if you have questions. But through the, did you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that's finished roof height, or is
Yes,
that
maximum.
equipment?
It's a maximum pitch.
Where does our mechanical, does that tack on top of it again?
Nope.
No, so
The
that
absolute
is
max.
the
So
mechanical.
including
If
any
there is
screening of
mechanical,
rooftop equipment, any
cannot exceed.
projections for elevator shafts and stairwells, that's a maximum height.
Okay,
Correct.
cannot exceed.
Correct. And that is based on average finish grade
Okay.
for measuring that height.
All right.
Yeah, very good question. So that's that item. And then 5A, when the proposal came in, they asked if they had to do a street wall or if they could have this ability to have this cool public plaza space. And so I thought, well, that's fantastic. That's great if you can actually make that work and have this retail space and have it connect to 13. And so this is just a minor change to allow for that, because it's, again, that's the intent, is to create this vibrant, walkable kind of center of the project. And so both would achieve that, either a public plaza or a public space or a street wall. And here's an exhibit showing that height increase for just the area 4, that slight increase from 40 feet to 45 feet, just to allow for them to have rooftop decks on those townhouses. In areas 3, again, that's consistent with area 4 height of 45 feet. Area 6, when that one came through, they kind of did this creative design for some townhouses, but it's a little tricky with the grade change with Suzanne and wrapping around, and then you have the trail kind of on the back side of that. And so wanted to have it so there could be some pedestrian access, so if you're either live in one of those or you're visiting, that you could kind of connect back up to the sidewalk on Suzanne. And so requiring that there would be some kind of connection, some prominent and direct pedestrian route from the public sidewalk to the alley front doors. And so this exhibit shows that, kind of here's up along Suzanne, and here's the connection down to these townhouses, and then a connection back up to the trail as well. So in areas 7, 11, and 20, as I mentioned, that's kind of the Mount Hink area. And so some clarifications on housing types. So allowing for cottage houses, cottage courts, townhouses, and duplexes that could either be rear-loaded, alley-loaded, or could be fronting even like trails or green spaces. So kind of just a mix of housing types that would allow a little bit more flexibility and possibly allow for that essential professional housing as well. So here's that area. And then here's that design where it could kind of show some of the houses might be fronting on a green space, and they might be fronting on this green space along the trail as well. And these could be front-loaded or potentially could be alley-loaded, just depending on the grade and how the design would work out. Area 12, so setting a minimum commercial and retail space of 4,000 square feet, consistent with what we've negotiated with the developer for that. So just again, kind of getting that locked in the development standards. In Area 12 also, we had a shift that you saw, I think, with the PUD amendment number 2, which is to move a multi-use path to the west side of the property, which makes it safer. It puts it between this project and River's Edge. It takes it so you can connect to the trail along Celtice Way. And then you can come through, you can come between both projects and connect to the main trail on the river without having to come in front of the commercial businesses and all the driveway cuts, which creates safety issues if you're walking or, you have a stroller or if you have a bike. So that, we had to kind of adjust for that setback based on that. So shifted the buildings a little bit to move the trail there. And we also added some on-street parking in that amendment for Area 12 to make the project a little more functional. So it doesn't change the nature of it, it's just how we're measuring it, and it makes it, it's kind of the intent is to have like urban form, kind of mixed use and commercial buildings in that area.
Is there rear parking on the
There
commercial
is,
for
yes,
staff?
exactly.
And loading and unloading?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
they're
so-
walking behind the loading dock zones?
It would be in a
Separate.
nice kind of buffered area, behind all that, so it'd be the safe area, separate from all of that, so you wouldn't be, there wouldn't be conflicts with the parking, and you wouldn't have the conflicts
Pull
with
out.
the curb cuts, so.
Okay.
And then here's the other one I mentioned, the conditional building height increase for Area 13. And this would just be for portions of the building. So as the design came in, and Phil will show you some of that, kind of what the concept is at this point, there's some opportunities to do some different things and take advantage of the roof. But we had concerns if the whole roof was up to 60 feet, but maybe if there were certain areas that could actually be really fantastic way to design and take advantage of the property and really activate the project as well within that Area 13. And so this would just allow in certain areas of the building, and we also capped it, so it's either a certain square footage or a percentage of the building size if the building size changed, and whatever the lesser is, so we're making sure that not the whole roof becomes that square footage and then that height increase. And then it's to allow for a rooftop pool deck, as well as some kind of commercial uses in that space to allow for the food, beverage, or some pool support facility. So, and then also to allow for the elevator shaft and the stair access. Again, maximum height would be at the top of all of those things. So it wouldn't be able to go any taller than that. And this is the Area 12, kind of showing you where the multi-use path is along the back edge now. And here it kind of used to be along the front. And so we had all those curb cuts that were not ideal if you're on a multi-use path. And so now it comes down here and connects in nicely. There still is a sidewalk on the frontage, but that kind of required that reduced setback. And then we've also clarified for Area 20, so that's brand new area, as I mentioned on there, so we've added that with that potential for the professional essential worker housing. And then we have made some changes, some refinements to stormwater, and so there's an exhibit in there, but just kind of clarifying some of the stormwater techniques that are being used with best practices. And then wanted to clarify too, we've had some questions about fencing and what that looks like. And so we're gonna be adding more details into the master declaration document, not into the PUD, but we're adding in the PUD where you need to look. So if you're a developer, you need to reference a master declaration document for the specifics on that, but we're gonna have the general ones in here. So we kind of require that they comply with the general city standards for the heights. We also had the one in there that it has to be kind of, if in the front and the side yard, you need to be able to see through it, so it's not just a big, solid wall. So those kind of things, the kind of the stepping of the height, but then we wanted to clarify a few other things with the design in the separate document. In this one, we also wanted to clarify that corner lots and any homes that have any parking off the alley that's on a corner, that has to be screened and vegetated per our commercial standards. And so that adds a little bit more guidance on, what needs to be used for kind of the vegetation or a masonry wall, as long as they're not impeding that vision triangle. So we don't want to create that safety issue. Okay, now we're gonna get into the findings. So went through the overview. And these will be, relatively unchanged from before, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on each of them unless you have questions. So 7 findings that have to be made for a PUD request. The first is if the proposal is or is not in conformance with our comprehensive plan. So again, yes,
And these findings are based on our old comp plan?
correct.
Okay,
Yes, so this item and the next item you'll have, the next public hearing are both the old comp plan
okay.
because of when they were submitted, so. Yes, so this one is within the Spokane River District. You can see the property outlined here, and it's in the transition area. And so the Spokane River District area tomorrow, and the scale of development will be urban in nature, promoting multimodal connectivity to downtown. There's kind of a mixed density, we're within that, and then the open space parks, pedestrian and bicycle connections, and public spaces are provided throughout. So a number of comprehensive plan objectives comply with this, so I'll just note the names and not read them all out. So waterfront development, vistas, community design, parks efficiency, connectivity, economic and workforce development, cooperative partnerships, managed growth, housing. So those are the main ones that you have reviewed before. This also falls within the shoreline area. So the shoreline area is to make public access to the river and lake shorelines a priority. We have definitely done that with this project. Finding B8B, that the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. And you saw some of the aerial photos and the drone photos before, but you can see this fits right in between kind of the Riverstone and the Bellerive neighborhoods and then River's Edge here. Very consistent uses. This map still shows it as vacant just because it's under construction. So in the future, that'll change and it'll be our future land use map, which is planned unit development. So it allows for that mixed use development. Finding B8C, the proposal is or is not compatible with natural features of the site and adjoining properties. So the subject property has some nice grade change from Salties Way down to the river. The pre-existing grade had approximately 45-foot elevation drop. And so we've been doing some significant grading, taking advantage of that slope to allow for kind of different residential and commercial uses throughout there. There's significant grading that's been happening too to remove the pits and to kind of clean the soil and take advantage of the soils that are on the site. So that's all taking place. Here are some additional photos so you can kind of see some of the site progress. So this is the park area in Area 6. Mountain Hink's kind of behind this, but you can kind of see into this area. So we're going to have the areas 13, 5A, 5B. So we have, a lot of the site is in that photo. And here's another one kind of looking at areas 1 and 2. As you wrap that corner, this is Atlas up in this direction. Here's another one. So Salties Way is here. So the roundabout is at this location basically. And so this photo is kind of the same as this. It's just further around the corner. Finding B8D, that the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by existing public facilities and services. So prior to construction within this project, the utilities did not exist. We have 2 phases of infrastructure, and the first is including the public water, sewer, and stormwater, and the private utilities. And future phases of infrastructure will provide for public and private utilities to all areas of the PUD. There's a map I'll show you that shows kind of the infrastructure that's in place and what's future. So here's also the updated stormwater map I mentioned in the earlier kind of changes to the PUD that we've done some refinements on stormwater. So this map shows that. And then this is the map that shows the installed utility areas and then the future phases for utilities. Additionally, under that same finding, wastewater, had some noted, they wanted to speak to some of the changes that happened in there and make sure that it was going to work okay with their system, just because it's a couple of different basins it drains to. And so they had these comments, but they were able to work through with Welch-Comer to make sure it's going to work with city's system and make sure it's not going to negatively impact the system. So finding B8E, that the proposal does or does not provide adequate private common open space area as determined by the commission. No less than 10% of gross land area, free of buildings, streets, driveways, or parking areas. Common open space shall be accessible to all users of the development and usable for open space and recreational purposes. As you're well aware, the project, all the open space is open to the public, and it currently has 38% open space, which is approximately 24 acres of public open space areas and 12 acres of open space along the waterfront. And here's some images of the park and the open space areas, some of the swale, public access to the river, and the dog park, which also functions as a beach and swim and play area for our community members. Finding B8F, that off-street parking does or does not provide parking sufficient for users of the development. So the parking within the project is consistent with our city code requirements, with a few of those exceptions already approved for food and beverage. And in PUD Amendment 2 that you already approved, We did adjust a little bit of the parking for those areas 12 and 13 and some of the on-street parking, but this PUD amendment does not have any additional parking changes. And finding B8G, that the proposal does or does not provide for an acceptable method for the perpetual maintenance of all common property. So we have a master association that has been formed, and they'll be doing all of the maintenance. There might be a few other sub-associations within that, but all of that will be taken care of. And there are 16 conditions. They're all the same as were approved previously. So no changes to those. They're just included again for approval with this PUD amendment this evening. And then there is a note from wastewater that with the comments that they've outlined above, that they have the system capacity, willingness, and intent to serve this project as proposed. So the decision point is approval of amendments to the planned unit development to include development area 20 and make minor modifications to the development standards as noted in the attachment 1. With that, be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Great report, Hillary. Appreciate that. Just wanted to touch on, making this finding of B8D with respect to utilities and streets, traffic in particular. I just want to have clarity in my mind. This commission approved the original PUD for this at 630 units was the original layout, if
Right.
you will, correct? And am I correct that that even with area 20 added in, the new total would be 544, or a good bit less than the original? So
That is correct.
as we go through amendment 1 and 2, and now we're going to be 3, and we're going to have two more amendments, probably maybe 3.
Right.
We haven't added density here, have we?
Correct. No, you're right. The numbers are going down.
Thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
On, let's see, area 5A and 13, the two that have proposed height increase.
Yes.
Can you give an example of a public benefit that might be of interest?
So something might be if they could provide, so if the developers are able to provide some additional fees, so I mean, even just more value for the land, and then Ignite could use that for something that could be, potentially housing, for example, like could that be for essential professional housing, or could it be for some improvements to parkland or something? It has to be within the same district and ideally within the project site, but it have to be within the Atlas project for these areas. Area 13 is, that's in the Lake District, so that's a little bit slightly different. But yeah, I know Tony and Phil are able to answer more specifics on that too, if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. So that decision would be through like a process through Ignite?
It would be, absolutely, yep.
John,
Are you the sole presenter tonight?
I am, other than Phil's actually,
I
he's gonna come
understand
and
there,
share.
okay. I have a couple questions. and I
Okay.
know- The first one, it talks about, and things I mentioned, public benefit.
Right.
That Ignite can negotiate things if there's a public benefit. I was under the impression, I don't know if it's my impression, that the city council determines what is a public benefit, or administratively. Can Ignite determine what a public benefit is?
They
How can that
can,
be?
and I'll probably let Phil and Tony speak to that a little bit more, because we're working with Ignite to dispose of or develop the land, and so they have a little bit more ability to kind of negotiate through that process, because they have different tools than the city does to develop property. And so they do an agreement to negotiate exclusively as one step, and then they do a development disposition agreement, and they can kind of work through some things and negotiate, which is different than the city. So this is kind of a unique project in that we have this partnership with Ignite, and it's a PUD. So within, whatever was in the PUD, that's our thing, but then there are some things that we're working with Ignite to make determinations on.
Well, I think I understand that the transaction here, and the city and everybody is to be congratulated, because there's a great risk that was taken, and it looks like we're making progress on it, and that was, somebody bought some property, not the city, because they didn't have any money, and the property was, I think, a Grayfield site, and they're going through a thing where you're getting a park as a primary goal.
Right.
And then how are you going to pay for that? Where are you going to sell some land? So I think that's great. But the public benefit, do you have any, or does the council have any input on what they term public benefit? Or is that up to Ignite?
I think I'll let Phil and Tony speak to that, just because they're a little
Well,
bit
the
more familiar
reason,
with.
reason I bring that up, there was a matter that came before, not this, but before the elected council.
Right.
About moving dirt from point A to point B.
Right.
And I think you could make the argument that, well, one group felt one way and one group felt the other way. And I just, well, I think it's important that the city, in some fashion, maybe just a position of either rejecting or accepting, but somehow the city is involved in determining the public benefit.
And I should clarify, so I sit on a steering committee, so does Christy Wood, Councilmember Christy Wood, and so does our city administrator. And so we do review the development applications as well, so we are involved in that and can kind of weigh in on some things, so I
But
guess
you
that's
act
helpful to know.
on behalf of the city council and on behalf of the department? Or
No, we're providing input, so.
Okay, and the second item, as I said here, that there's going to provide workforce housing. Can you give me what's criteria in determining workforce housing?
So it's to allow for that. It's not saying it's necessarily going to result in that, but it's to allow for the workforce housing. So there's, the thought right now is kind of that, I mentioned before, the Regional Housing and Growth Issues Partnership. We're looking at housing for local workers. And so there's different ways you can define like what is true workforce housing, there's true affordable, and it's based on kind of the income bracket and what's affordable. You know, is it 80% area median income? And then you kind of look at the different things. So I think what we're looking at is not the true definition of workforce, but it's truly what can people within that category afford. So it could be teachers, it could be nurses, it could be, you know, service work. There's different people in the community that are unable to find housing at this point. And so looking at what that income is and then what the housing price point. I don't know that we've determined that specifically for this. It kind of, it's evolving. You know, it might be I mean, Sarah might even know, just as, you know, realtor, it's 300,000 maybe might be something that some people could afford, but that
Well,
might not.
I don't want to be, you know, you could take the far extreme is workforce housing is any housing that doesn't, it's not retirement homes,
Right.
you know? And affordable is anything somebody can afford. But it's narrower than that. And so whenever and we've had other people present this, and they're going to do workforce housing, affordable housing, but it's not defined. I would think that somewhere along the line, we need to define that so we all have some agreement, acceptance of what it is. And maybe you can call it another item, but I just, this is getting to be a bigger and bigger issue, in my mind at least, because everybody has a different interpretation of what this may be.
Right.
And until we get a common understanding, then it'd be hard.
And I
Thank-
think, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I think that's why we call it essential worker housing and not workforce, because you're right, there's all these different terms, and we do need to define. The Regional Housing Growth Issues Partnership does have some FAQs, and there's some housing profiles that they worked on with CDA 2030 that help kind of show, okay, you know, if you're in this industry, here's what you can make and here's what you can afford. But yeah, we'll do more.
Just some point we accept, but this is a definition. You know.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Peter, I think those are some great questions, which I think you should ask again when either Tony or Phil get up here. Because, yeah, I see in the package, they say potential for essential worker housing, which is great, and I agree that we don't have anything defined. And I've had some conversations asking, well, can we, when this land is sold to a developer, they're going to do whatever Ignite and them do based on the request for proposal and kind of stay within some guidelines of some of the stuff we've seen in this PUD before and what we're changing now. So when that developer purchases property and, you know, can we say we want essential workforce housing in there? There's nothing legally we can say that, oh, you have to have 10 or 5 or 10%. We hope that maybe the essential workforce housing will come about. And I'm all for that, but there's no way that right now, even if we had a definition more clearly of workforce housing, essential workforce housing, affordable housing, whatever you want to call it, if there's no requirements to actually provide that in a development, regardless of this or that, I don't know, and Randy can maybe touch on this. Legally, can't we do that at this body, or can city council do that? I understand you would like a defined definition of it. The definition is great, but enforcing that definition sometime might be a little hard, and I know I've talked to Hillary about this a few times, and a few other people, and it's tough. So, and as far as the potential public benefit that might come from this, I think that potential benefit is long-term, where it isn't like, okay, we've got, unless it's in here, some defined open space. The potential benefit is long-term down the road based on how Ignite operates and how, yes, they can purchase a piece of property, they develop it because they have the means, and then that money down the road, once that district comes up, and Tony or Phil can talk a little bit more on that, but that's the potential public benefit, unless there's something defined in a presentation.
And, Mr. Chair, my issue is twofold. One first is the term. If we don't have a definition for the term, why do we use it?
I hear what you're
I think it's
saying.
very misleading to say we're going to try to do this when there's no way we can do it. We're going to try. We're going so it's never going to rain again. Well, if we can't do it, then we shouldn't have it in here. I think it's misleading. Secondly, the public benefit. My issue is not what it is, but who makes that determination. And I'm looking to Hillary for that, and she responded in a fashion that has the city participating. And I will root through that the city has the ultimate a position to say yes it is or no it isn't a public benefit. And that's the only thing that's the two issues I'm at. And I'm not going to ask Phil or Tony about that because. Not that I'm afraid, but I think it's an issue for the city, not for them.
I hear that.
And-
I'll ask that question when they do
Okay.
come up, so we have some clarification from those folks, instead of putting Hillary kind of on the spot and say, who defines that public benefit sometimes, so. I'll
very
ask
good.
those questions if you don't want to ask them. They're great questions.
Well, no, I don't think that they're the right people to
It's-
ask. But I do want to say that this is a very unique project because we are both the developer and the property owner in some respect. And it's a very interesting transaction, and I believe when it's all said and done, in several years from now, Hillary's planning group and so forth, they'll be writing a couple books or papers about this because this is an extremely interesting, complex, complicated transaction. And I'm speaking for the thing in total, not against it.
Let me get a little clarification on that. Peter mentioned that we are the developer and the owners. Can you clarify exactly? At one time, the city,
We were, yes, so we were the
Yes.
owner initially, and then we gave over all the land except for the park to Ignite for them to go through this development process. So technically, for this PUD, Ignite is the owner applicant on it.
and the
But
developers are.
definitely, there is a partnership and alliance, right, between.
And the
organizations.
development of the land, and Tony or Phil can kind of touch on this, is when they put out a request for proposal on all these other areas, that's how the discussion is, based on how we said this should be developed and how it should be with the package that we got a long time ago from that PUD. So that's how that development package comes up. Any other questions before we let Hillary's, oh,
I have
sorry.
a separate question that doesn't have to
Oh.
do with affordable or attainable or all the semantics we want to play games with. When Ignite has all these different developers inputting and creating their vision, who is looking over the entire outcome of how those buildings speak to one another? I'm all about, I don't want it to look like an HOA. I don't want it to look like the same shed roof. Every single house should not have a shed roof. I know they're cheaper, but how and who is overseeing that? Our city has a design review committee, but who is actually the umbrella? And I'm hoping it's not Welch Comer, because we've got skin in the game. I'm not interested. I think it has to be a distance, a long arm, so that we get unique. I worked on the Granville Island development and what looked over Granville Island in my early youth, and we made sure that everything looked different, that it was unique, that it was special. And this is an opportunity not to have conforming HOA-looking, gee, we all did it all the same, yay, it's gray, white, and black, moving on. I want to see something better than that. I'm not sure someone is seeing that umbrella. And I'm really passionate about this, as are we all. But I want to see the end result being looking forward and being better than the easy stuff. And I'm so tired of shed roofs, I'm thinking chicken coops. So anyway, I really am so tired of them. They're like the 2022 design element. So I'm hoping there's somebody there who is omnipotent and has good oversight to make sure that that building doesn't look just like that building, that looks just like that. You can flip it over sideways, but it's still the same building. Mirror imaging does not change the envelope. So I want to see a better vocabulary, and I'm not quite seeing it yet. So hopefully something will come up.
We do have an Atlas Design Review Committee, so
Okay.
that does review it. And we have Del Hatch as part of that, and then we have some of the Heartland Development Team. I'm on that, Phil's on that, Tony. And so we have a group of us that will review each of the submittals that come in and look at that and make sure it's compliant with, because there's architectural design guidelines that were adopted separate from the PUD.
Right.
So we look at that as well as the development standards, and then look at kind of how the whole project is coming together, and we provide quite a bit of feedback, which
Okay.
is, yes,
Let's hope
very
it just
important for the
gets
process.
better as it grows. It's just looking a little conformist right now.
And
Okay.
I do want to make a comment. I drive by there like a lot of people do, and I look, I see buildings going up, and I did call Hillary and ask her if the buildings that are there, has any one of those developers asked for any variation or change from what we, this commission, did approve within the package for those design guidelines. So and she says, no one's come forward with any changes, and if they did, they would have to go through that process.
They've been coming
that
through this PUD
Hillary
amendment
just
process.
mentioned. So,
Correct, yeah.
yeah. Okay, good.
Yep.
Okay, Hillary,
Okay.
off the hot seat. I take it Phil or Tony's going to talk, which is great. Question,
Nobody.
did the applicant ever have to sign or anything on the, was this giving the new name, address and stuff?
They should if they're going to speak.
Okay, well, we'll give this back, and Phil, you can put your information that we need now, and I'm just going to swear you in. And do you affirm that your testimony will be true and correct?
I do.
And just state your name and the city you live in.
Phil Boyd, Welch Comer Engineers, on behalf of Ignite, 330 East Lakeside, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Okay, go ahead, thank you.
You're welcome. Chairman Messina, I'm glad to take questions as we go.
Okay.
If that's easier, because if we hit a topic that one of the commissioners is interested in, I'm glad to stop and chat about it.
Well, let me start off real quick, because I know you're going to do your presentation. You heard some of the questions. Can you address the benefit to the public, let's say, and the potential of essential workforce housing, and in your view, how best you might be able to have that as a benefit to the public? And I want to get those two questions out of the way, and then you can go right to your presentation. Sorry.
If I might,
Yes.
I actually need to present
Okay.
some context for the commissioners to look at.
Okay, great.
And then either Tony or I will tag team it as we get through it. But I think it would be useful for the commissioners to kind of see what the impetus of that line in the PUD application was for.
That'd be great. Go right ahead.
Yep, thank you. So, and what Hillary and I tried to coordinate a little bit, so I wasn't repeating information that she already had presented. Some of that's unavoidable, but I did try to break it into three categories, kind of parcel performance standards, a lot what she talked about, site enhancements, which is what I consider public good and good urban design, somewhat in reference to what Commissioner Fleming got to. Because this is by a public body, Ignite CDA, their reference is a little different than if this was just a purely private development. And then the additional land development part. So those are the three categories I want to walk through. Just showing you this from the original PUD, you see the triangle parcel is missing. This was going to be open space because Mount Hink was such an insurmountable challenge at the time because of the economics of it. Remember, this was in 2018. The world was different. When the triangle parcel came in, we added some density in here, a little different, potential different housing types, but still Mount Hink was open space. This is the image that Hillary showed you earlier, and you can see we're proposing development in this area because we believe we've created an acceptable economic condition and acceptable to Ignite, which I'll get into in a little bit here, to move that mountain to be able to develop that area. Hillary showed you this earlier with the metrics down here about density, the different product types that's in there. This has changed a little bit as well. One of the big things here is the additional commercial space. And I'll reference that a little later when we start talking about Area 5A and 13. I'm going to use this reference area map, the key map. I'll attempt not to gloss over the areas. They're kind of in my head and in Hillary's head, and so if I start talking about an area and you guys can't reference it, tell me and I'll go back to one of these maps, but I'm using it throughout so you guys can make sure you have your bearings. So parcel performance standards, Hillary talked about Area 6 over here, and this is just an example of as we move through the development of this area, you can kind of see the physical condition there. But working through with a developer and Hillary's team, we're able to create this connection because one of the important features of this development is a strong front door connection. Well, this is really the back door. So how do you create a front door connection for these units down here? And so that was the method that we were proposing that the developer accomplish, and that's why it's part of this PUD. We talked about areas 3 and 4 and the additional height increase, and remember 3 already has the height, 4 is where we're asking for it, and the lot depth. A little more detail on the lot depth. When the triangle parcel came in, we were trying to adjust the lots in order to fit them between the waterfront, which was there, and the boundary line up in here. And by the time you kind of worked everything out, we had to pull 4 or 5 feet out of these lots here. That needs to be accommodated in the PUD now. This is the product type, and I think this goes to some of the comments Commissioner Fleming made. Here's the product type. They're kind of a row home here. These are the rooftops that accesses. So these rooftops actually look over these houses. And you can imagine the reason Toll Brothers is doing this is so you get a river view. But here's the product type. These are just 2 snippets from what they're showing. So a little different, not the shed roof, and that is a topic we have worked on fervently because many in a design review committee feel the same way about that. But it's interesting the comment you hear from the developers, that's what's selling, which that doesn't translate into good architecture necessarily, but sometimes it's a challenge to get that changed, but we work hard at it. Here you can see the rooftop accesses and people up here. So this is one of the front row units, and this is the back row unit here. So back row, front row. One other comment here, and I'll show you this a little bit later, but just to point it out here, this is a public connection that runs all the way up to Southeast Way. So if you're up on the Southeast Way shared use path, you can take a stairway and a trail all the way down to the waterfront, which is one of the things we put in the original PUD because connectivity was an important feature of the PUD, the original PUD. Here's that same height that Hillary showed earlier for the rooftop access. A little bit about 5A and 13. So 5A and 13. This is a mixed-use building with it proposed for condominium. This is proposed for a boutique hotel. And that's what generated the request for additional height. This is from Architects West who developed this. So to give you guys your bearings, here's Atlas coming through, Spokane River. This is the condominium building here, commercial on the ground floor, parking inside the building. And this is within the current 45-foot height. And this is what is proposed to be a boutique hotel subject to getting additional height out of this PUD application. And I'll show you an exhibit of this earlier. This is where I might talk a little bit about the public good part. When we're looking at this building here, there's the opportunity to add additional height to it. It was actually an idea that came out of our group as we were looking at it, and we thought, gosh, Area 20 may be coming into the mix. It would be interesting to be able to generate something, perhaps in the way of funding, to support, potentially, using that word again, essential workforce housing. And I know that's a vague term. As we talked through that with Tony and the Ignite team, we decided to chase that a little bit with the developer. It's really early in the process with them, and we can't quite negotiate that deal because they haven't worked through all their costs as part of the A&E, the agreement to negotiate exclusively. And so we don't really know how much we can get out of that, if there's going to be a monetary exchange. Is it going to be a small number, or is it going to be a big number? That's the thing that Ignite will weigh, the board will weigh at some point, if they can generate potentially additional funds that might support some other housing opportunity in Area 20. And the whole story might not be here yet, so I can kind of continue through, because there's some discussion about Area 20 that might be useful for the commission to hear as well. This is the hotel component. So if, here, get your bearings again, Spokane River, Atlas Road is right here. This is a large plaza. Let me go back to this. You can see the plaza here and the plaza here as well. A strong pedestrian connection through that corridor as well. So in their desire to have a boutique hotel there, one of the things that they said is, we need a pool, which I'm not a hotel person, but apparently they need a rooftop pool. They need support facilities, a little, I don't want to call it a bar, juice bar, whatever it is, food and beverage, we'll call it up here, locker rooms, vertical circulation, elevator, stair tower, elevator, stair tower. So we asked them for their proposal. They put this together, and there's percentages, and as Hillary has said, we've capped it to a maximum of square footage or percentage of the rooftop. Again, this is some feature that if Ignite were to allow it, and this is a little bit unique because Ignite is the landholder, but they're also a public entity. And so they're looking for the public good, and what can they, extract might be a hard word, but extract might be the word I would use here, out of the builder, that would be a public good. If the builder simply says, hey, I'm going to throw money at you, maybe that's not good enough for Ignite. A couple of points about site enhancements that are public good and good urban design. Hillary talked about Area 12 here, and she covered that pretty darn well. But just to recap on it, that shared use path that went right through there has always been a concern of ours from an engineering standpoint, and we were looking hard to figure out how to get rid of that. And putting the shared use path on the back of the property here provides a straight shot, no interruptions through cars and approaches, and then it requires those setbacks that are in the PUD application. That was a challenging thing to negotiate with both the Area 12 property owner and the adjacent property owner, but we think it's a really important feature, and Ignite stepped up and spent additional funding to build that in that corridor, because essentially you're doubling up, because now you have a sidewalk here and a shared use path back here, but the safety aspect of it was important for the community.
Will that be lit? Will that be illuminated?
Yes, yep, and it's landscape.
Safety, nighttime, buses getting home? Okay.
Yep, it was important to us as well when we were doing the design on, plus it's landscaped, trails are not necessarily always landscaped on both sides. This one is landscaped alongside it. The stormwater, Hillary showed this map here. The stormwater is unique in this system because we were driving density. And when you drive density, stormwater swells consume real estate that would be sellable otherwise. So we started looking at some innovative treatment technologies, which we ended up using in a number of areas, which allow a higher infiltration rate, which means a smaller footprint, which means we can use less real estate for stormwater and more to sell. Because, as one of the commissioners pointed out, I think it was Commissioner Lutra, the city purchased this, they hope to get reimbursed for their purchase price. And we took 12 acres out of the most valuable real estate to turn into a park. So early on in 2018, when we were doing the financial feasibility study, we really had to drive density in order to make that equation work and stay in the black. Using these unique stormwater treatment technologies allowed us to do that. Also have some rain gardens up in this area, but one of the other important features it allowed was this. So instead of having the typical swale with a tree in the middle of it that might grow cattails, we're able to do more urban style landscaping in here, especially at the bulb outs here with bushes, and we don't have to have swales on every street corner. So when you get out of your car, if you're parked on the side, you walk through the squishy swale, you actually get to walk across a nice flat grass area. So that was one of the other important aesthetic elements of using that different stormwater treatment. And then the big one we're talking about, additional land development. So this is a little bit of a story. It's Area 20 here. And we've called it the fate of Mount Hink. And we've been working on this thing since the beginning, because early on when we looked at the economics of it, boy, it would be great to get rid of that thing. Unfortunately, what you could sell the developed land for would not support what it costs to dispose of that. But Tony and I have always had it in the back of our mind, we got to figure out a way to do something different with that. And because just using it as open space, passive open space, was not what we considered the highest and best use for it. It would end up just pushing that pile up into, a mound and putting some dryland grass seed on it. But we did look at that as one of the options. And so the other option was perhaps we could go in and process the material and sell it or give it away. And then the third option was to actually haul the thing off-site. So if we were to just leave it on site, we did a quick little study, and if you guys are used to reading topographic maps with a big, that you can kind of get an idea of what pushing all that up into a mountain would look like. So it's not great because it would consume some of area 11 up here. The other option was we process it, and by processing it, we take that material, separate topsoil from aggregates and from wood waste, and then slowly either give it or sell it. So give it away or sell it. We estimated it would take 5 or more years. We would also flood the market with topsoil, especially if we were giving it away for free. And you can imagine some of the private entity consternation we would get out of doing that. But that was one of the options we looked at. And then we started looking at the idea of hauling it off-site. And to get your bearings, this is Ramsey Road, here's the Croc Center. And this is, ITD calls it the 40-acre pit. ITD owns this 40 acres, and there's a giant hole in the ground. We looked at 2 different options of hauling this material here, the red route or the yellow route. The council approved the red route. And so we're currently in the process of advancing that so we can move that pile of material from here to there, which will allow us to develop this land. We started looking at a couple of scenarios, just standard development areas. And as we move through it, Tony kind of challenged us to say, well, what if we were to look at even a higher density model that might bring the price point down to start to address some of this, whatever the correct term is, essential worker housing. And so we started looking at this model here using twin homes. And so when we talk about trading off benefits from area 5A or 13, it may come in the form of revenue to Ignite that then Ignite may deploy here in some way to support that type of housing, or they may not. They are a public group of people who are publicly minded, but it would be premature for them to kind of agree to that because they don't have all the facts on the table yet. So hopefully that covers a little bit. I know you guys will have questions, but I wanted to at least get through that part of it. And then either I can attempt to answer or Tony can attempt to answer.
Go right ahead, Sarah.
When you say twin homes, are you talking about duplexes? Is that, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, let me ask a question. That Area 20, Is that, as I recall years ago, I haven't been here very long, so I don't know a lot about all that transpired, but I thought that was contaminated.
None of the tests that we have done, so, without getting too laborious of the description of it,
Right.
the city partnered with the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality Brownfields Group. The Brownfields Group came in, did a bunch of testing on the material, did not find any contamination on it. When we start moving it from here over to the ITD pit, DEQ will continue testing it. And so we have a partnership program with them to test it, to confirm there's no
And
contamination.
I really have no problem with density of height. In fact, I'd rather see that. And you guys are only about 10 units an acre. That's not much in my opinion, although some of my community would disagree with me. And this is something I had encountered in another place that I live. My concern is you have to transport that fill from this site. Apparently, looks like it's going through Riverstone and up Ramsey to the dump. Is there any possibility that something from that transfer could spill onto the surrounding neighborhoods and cause problems with people in the area? And I'm asking that as a planning commission, not as a planner.
You mean just when the trucks are hauling there, that there's just
Absolutely.
spillage
They
coming
don't
out?
cover trucks out here. They're all open, whereas in Florida, we forced them to put a cover on them, so it kept it down somewhat.
The answer to it is yes, we actually plan for spillage, that when the trucks are making corners, that they're going to spill. We also plan for sweeping. So part of the contract for Ignite's contractor on this is we have a pay item that we can tell them to sweep the street once a day, twice an hour, whatever is necessary in order to address the spillage that may occur. They may choose to start to mitigate it by not loading the trucks so heavily. There'll be load limits and things like that, but that is
Thank you very much.
Don't we have a city requirement you cover loads? I think one of my favorite holidays here is Leaf Fest. And when they go through Leaf Fest, they say that during this period of time, the loads do not have to be covered for the leaves. So I assume that other times it is. So I would assume that when you take these loads, that, you know, you can load them as high as you want or as low as you want, but you still have a requirement of buffering it so this thing doesn't spill, doesn't come out. I think that's the rule. I think it's a rule when you take stuff to the dump, you get tickets. Anyway,
I know that the county dump facility, they're requesting, and they have signs, I've gone in there with trailers, they say, cover your loads, come in. Whether or not there's a city, county, state regulations to do that. I hear what Phil's saying, that, you know, they're going to cover their loads and sweep up the streets. Hopefully it'll be on a daily basis, you know, maybe twice a day at least, if not more, but at least a daily basis to do that. So I don't know if Hillary, you want to add anything to that?
We're not sure if there's a requirement. We can certainly
Right.
look into it. I think Phil's done his research on it, so I
Well-
don't know that it would be for dirt, that it would apply to that. I think it's more if you're hauling loads of things, you want to secure your load, but
Well, I would have to trust Ignite to do their due diligence for the city, as they're trying to. Other questions? No? And I don't know if Tony's going to speak, or, you're not done yet, Phil.
Oh.
Don't go anywhere. Not that I have a lot of questions for you. The whole situation of this has changed dramatically when we first started. And given the current situation with land values and everything else, and I talked to Tony about this a little bit. I remember in the beginning, we didn't know what was going to be sold or who was going to buy it, what developer, and that certainly has changed. And again, and maybe, I don't know if Tony wants to answer this or you do, I still want to try to clarify the long-term public benefit for this isn't right today, except for what we're hearing. It's down the road where those dollars come back to the city in some sort of form, and maybe other land is purchased with some of the benefits of this. And I don't know if you guys talked about it, if that's the case, you have such a great windfall now in this, which is probably very unexpected, which is great. Has there been any thought about, hey, we have a great windfall dollars that we can do something else with, and look at purchasing property and working with a willing developer or something to actually make essential workforce housing that project, so that perhaps maybe, it's not just a little piece of a place, but actually doing something like that. And I'm not sure if I made myself clear, but that's kind of the question, and I don't know if Tony wants to come up and address that as well.
I didn't sign in, but
Oh, bad boy. Do you affirm that your testimony will be true and correct? I'm reading that because this is all new to me. Okay.
yes, I do.
All right, thanks, Tony. Go right ahead.
Where do you want to start? So,
Wherever you want to.
so the long-term benefit. So once again, we are making money off the land sales through these development teams that are acquiring this. And so we are generating revenue from that, which we are basically reinvesting into the site development to get everything built. Over the long term, we will benefit from what we call tax increments. So we get the property taxes that are paid on these assets that are built. And that goes on the tax rolls. And we will use those funds to continue to build out the district as long as we need to. And when that's done, theoretically, we could close the district early and turn all that value back over to the taxing entities. And the city would benefit the county, the highway districts, NIC, and so forth. So that's kind of the long-term value proposition works. Right now, we're just kind of taking the revenues we're making from the land sales, plowing it back into development of the site.
Okay.
But the long-term benefit will be actually the vertical build-out.
Okay.
And as Phil said, moving Mount Hink is not inexpensive. It's going to cost us $5 million to move that up there
Yeah.
over the next 3, 4, 5 months, hopefully shorter. But it's going to be quite an ordeal.
Okay.
What other questions can I answer?
Question, Sean? Anybody? No. No, that's, I think it, Tony.
Okay.
Thank you. I have no one else signed up, unless someone's come in and wants to speak on this. If not, I will close the public testimony on this and bring it to council for discussion.
Council?
I mean,
Say council.
council.
Commission.
I promoted everybody. Go right ahead if anyone has any words of wisdom here.
I don't know about words of wisdom. I wouldn't go that far, but I think some discussion,
Sure.
perspective, I think.
Sure.
We knew going into this thing that it's going to change a number of times, I think Mr. Boyd and Mr. Burns predicted we'd be into a number of amendments. You look at other big PUDs, Coeur d'Alene Place and others, there's amendments along the way, and this is going to continue that way. And I don't think through Amendment 3, which I would support, that we've lost our milepost of where we're going, which is a project that provides, you talk about benefit and public benefit, not just the tax increment funding value that this, all that development versus a dilapidated abandoned mill site, all that new tax roll eventually goes into the public benefit to the city and whatnot. That's a huge benefit. But through Amendment 3, we haven't added significant density, to burden transportation and traffic and that sort of thing. We haven't lost track of the macro goals of this thing, if you will, which is all that waterfront, 38% open space. And, the typical PUD that we approve up here just says, as Hillary pointed out, she had the definition up there, that just says that, it has to benefit the development. So, if this wasn't as unique, this was Cottage Grove out on Prairie Avenue, the open space there only has to benefit the PUD itself. In this case, look what we're doing for the public here. So in my mind, there's no doubt that the public benefit we haven't lost that focus at all. 24 acres of open space, 12 of those acres are on the waterfront. We've made a few changes, a few tweaks along the way, but, I think we're in great shape.
Yeah, thanks, John. Any other, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I would agree with the development. It has a lot of great aspects. I think, to answer maybe a little bit of Peter's concerns about, essential housing, workforce housing, low, more affordable housing, I think there's, lots of definitions. I think the problem, why there's not one that's very standard, is it's kind of a moving target. Incomes change, interest rates change, the market changes, and as we've seen since this has started, the market's changed drastically. So I think with the intent of providing, more dense residence options, twin homes, cottage homes, those kind of things, I think that's about all we can hope for to when it gets developed, what the market looks like at that point and what the price point will be. But it looks like halfway through next year, they'll maybe get to the point where they're doing the infrastructure on that. So we're even further out from something being on the market that someone can purchase. So it's, I think, a best effort there to provide more housing, which we know there's a need for. So I think that question's always hard, and I don't know if people aren't trying to answer it. I think there's a lot of people concerned about it and a lot of people at the table trying to answer that. And maybe by the time that that's out for proposal, there'll be some options that make more sense and could be proposed in an amendment that could nail it down a little more, other than just providing an opportunity that looks more affordable than maybe, an acre of waterfront would be less affordable, So I think they're providing something that has an opportunity to be in a range that somebody working in the community could afford. So I appreciate that that is considered in this project, and I think the minor changes are mostly improvements, so.
Thank you. Go ahead, Peter.
I think that we should anticipate more amendments. I think when we first started this, there was a concept, an idea in a couple people's minds. How in the heck would this work? Remember, we had some meetings in here trying to figure out how we're going to design this. You had people come in, you'd talk to the community. We were, I don't want to say design build, it was getting pretty close to that. And I don't think anybody ever thought of having a hotel there. I think they might have wanted one, but I don't think anybody raised their hand and says, let's put a hotel there. It's one of these things that one thing leads to another. We recognize that, at least in my recollection, we recognized that PUD was a proper way to go. We had to have some parameter around there. We had to have due process. We had to have public input on changes, and that's why it comes before us. So I think that the program, the project is working as it should. They come up with new ideas, different ideas, how to make things better for the community, for everyone. And so I wholeheartedly support this.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Couple of things. Seeing today that we've added commercial square footage, so that adds to the tax revenue. We've also, through the updated stormwater, we've regained land that we couldn't use before, so that's a benefit. The revised stormwater, I like the idea that you don't have to have your kid fall or your dog fall in a wet, soggy pond. The other thing that I am concerned, though, and I know that we've just talked about it, but Objective 3.08 housing, design new housing areas to meet the city's need for all income and family status categories. As we all know, this is a shifting target, but other cities are dealing with this and fighting with the same issues, and we need to reach further than just our small community. All across America, affordable housing is a non sequitur now. Many cities are turning to self-funded, self-built land development to address that issue. And I was just talking to a local person down here, and he said, I don't want any of that affordable housing. I said, well, I guess you don't want your server, your bank teller, your teacher, your nurse, because those are the categories we lack. And not everyone wants a house on a piece of grass. So I have to commend this approach, that we are looking at duplexes, we're looking at multi-level, we're looking at townhouses, we're looking at alternative structures that maybe these people can get a roof over their head and not have to drive to Spokane to get it. And even Spokane now is untouchable. So I think that is the biggest concern for me, is that 3.08. I do not want to see this as being an elitist, only the rich can live here development, because that doesn't serve the city that we envisioned for this universe. So, but I think overall, I think everything that was put on the table today was good. I don't see any big speed bumps at all.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yep.
Bill? You're good? I agree with the commissioners, and I really can't add anything more than what they said, so I'm going to ask for someone hopefully to make some findings.
I'll make a finding.
Thank you.
This matter having come before the Planning Commission on March 8th, 2022, and there being present a person requesting approval of PUD 4-19M.3, a request for an amendment to a planned unit development known as Atlas Waterfront PUD. The applicant is Ignite CDA. The location is 64.01 acres located south of Celtice Way, west of Riverstone, east of River's Edge, and flanking the north bank of the Spokane River. The former property addresses are 2598, 2755, and 2850 West Celtice Way. Findings for the Planning Commission, we adopt items B1 through B7, standard boilerplate. B8, pursuant to section 17.07.230, planned unit development review criteria. A planned unit development may be approved only if the proposal conforms to the following criteria to the satisfaction of the commission. B8A, the proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan currently in use. This is based upon the following policies. Goal 1, acknowledging and enhancing the natural environment. Our comprehensive plan supports policies that preserve the beauty of our natural environment and enhance the beauty of Coeur d'Alene. We have cleaned up an ugly eyesore. We've accessed it to the public. We've updated the stormwater. We are only doing the best that we absolutely is top-notch for the area. Community design, we've employed current design standards. We've made it efficient. We're utilizing very unique planning methodologies for a slope, for the road, for the hillside, we'll see how Montague comes out, and then a new revised stormwater that makes it more efficient. We've added commercial square footage for the economic environment. We've taken the pathway from Celtice down to the waterfront out of hazardous zones in front of the commercial district, so that's a big win. And for the goal of the home environment, again, we've added to more variety in this recent submittal, and also some height exchanges to get a little more density, which is also a tax benefit. B8B, the design and planning of the site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. That is part of our master plan and always was the game, so we've more than met that. B8C, the proposal is compatible with natural features of the site and adjoining properties. In the case of property located within the hillside overlay zone, it does not create soil erosion, sedimentation of lower slopes, slide damage, or flooding problems. It prevents surface water degradation or severe cutting or scarring and reduces the risk of catastrophic wildfire. We don't have many trees left up there, so I don't think we have that big a concern. B8D, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services, and we've certainly kept that in mind throughout this entire development. Let's see. B8E, the proposal does provide adequate private, common, open space area as determined by the commission, and we are standing now at 38%, which is more than enough. 24 acres plus 12 acres on the water that we never had. So now we have total access, and the dogs are already in that water. God bless them. B8F, off-street parking does provide parking sufficient for users of the development. This is based on our current code, especially in areas 12 and 13. There was some revision there. B8G, that the proposal does provide an acceptable method for the perpetual maintenance of all common property, and I understand a master association has been formed to address that issue. C, conclusion and decision, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of Ignite CDA for approval of the planned unit development as described in the application should be approved with the special conditions applied from point 1 through 16. And so the motion is to approve.
Okay, thank you. I have a first, need a second?
Second?
I have a second by Lutrip. Can we have a roll call, Shannon, please?
Fleming,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Yes.
McCracken,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Messina.
Yes. Okay, this item is approved. And Hillary, is this appealable to city council, or if it is,
This one is, yes, because it's
Huh?
final, yes, it's a final decision by the planning commission with the planned unit development, so this would
Okay.
be.
Oh, it's down.
and what's the timeframe on this
So we
appeal?
have that noted on the agenda, so you guys can kind of see that. So it's 15 days from the date of the decision. They would
Okay.
need to submit an appeal application to the planning department.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. Okay, thank you, appreciate it. The next item, which was supposed to be item A1-22, the applicant has decided to move to the May 10th meeting. Is that correct? Is
They
that-
have asked for the item to be tabled, so we will need the planning commission to make a formal vote on that. They've asked for 60 days
Okay.
to be able to kind of further vet the project and look at the pro forma. So
And that would be just a simple motion?
that would
or-
be, yes.
Okay. If we can have someone on the commission, just make a simple motion to table item A1-1-22 for 60 days?
I motion that we table A-1-22, I think that's right, for 60 days for our May meeting.
Great, thank you. I have a motion, a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So bid, moved on that item.
Okay.
Okay, moving along. And Mike's going to give us a little presentation. Next is, hold on, let me get to it. It's item A-2-22, the applicant is Aspen Homes and Development, a proposed plus or minus 6.191 acre annexation from county ag to city R1 to R17. Did I get it right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the applicant is Aspen Homes Development LLC, and they are requesting annexation of 5.9 acres in conjunction with zoning approval from County Ag Suburban to R1 and R17. Property is located at 1805 North 15th Street. Public legal notice was published in the Coeur d'Alene Press on February 19th, and all other required notifications have been made. There's a location map indicating where this property is located. It's here highlighted in red. This is 15th Street, and this is Interstate 90. Here's a close-up aerial photograph of the property, highlighted in red. The applicant is proposing two zones, an R1 zone in this area and R17 in this lower area. There's some significant slope on the northern part of this property, and the applicant has been in negotiations with the Parks Department on a possible open space land dedication. There's a bird's eye view looking north. You can see it's relatively flat here, and the hillside is located here. There's a bird's eye view looking west. This property will also be required to meet all the hillside ordinance requirements if it is approved for annexation. The area, the subject property is located in the ACI. And here's the annexation map that was submitted with the application. As you can see, the R1 is located here. There'd be a maximum of 4 single-family dwellings could be built there in the R1, and this is 2 acres in the R17, and a maximum of 34 units, multifamily, could be built here. Here's the existing zoning. It's zoned ag suburban in the county, and the proposed zoning is indicated below. R17 here, R1 here. You can see to the south is R17. Across the street to the west C17 and R17, and to north you got R3 and then ag suburban surrounding it. There are 4 findings that must be met in order to approve an annexation. It's finding B8 through B11. We'll start off with B8, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan indicates that this is in the Northeast Prairie area, and it is in 2 areas, the stable established and the urban reserve. The stable established are areas where the character of the neighborhoods has largely been established and in general should be maintained. The street network, the number of building lots, and general land uses are not expected to change greatly within the planning period. And in the urban reserve, these are areas of lower priorities for the city growth due to natural constraints such as topography, soils, and wetlands. They are also have city services constraints such as water, sewer, police, and fire protection. This slide represents 3 comprehensive plan objectives as it relates to this annexation request. The full list is on page 10 and 11 of your staff report. Objective 1.13, open space, encourage all participants to make open space a priority with every development and annexation. Objective 3.16, capital improvements, ensure infrastructure and essential services are available prior to approval for properties seeking development. And objective 4.01, city services, make decisions based on the needs and desires of the citizenry. Next finding, finding B9, that public facilities and utilities are or are not available and adequate for the proposed use. This application has been run through the city staff for review for engineering, streets, fire, parks, wastewater, police departments have reviewed this application request in regards to public utilities and public facilities. The proposed annexation will not hinder staff's ability to continue to provide public facilities and utilities. Full list of staff comments is on page 13 of your staff report. The next finding is finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do or do not make it suitable for the request at this time. The topography slopes to the southwest, and there is an approximately 150-foot elevation drop on the northeast part of the subject property. The R1 part of the property does have significant issues with development as it relates to slopes and hillside designation. The western R17 part of the property is relatively flat and slopes to the west. The topography or physical constraints of the subject property is primarily associated with the R1 part of the property. The physical characteristics of the site with the proposed split zoning and hillside requirements do not make it unsuitable for the annexation request. The entire property is subject to the hillside ordinance and it's in current configuration with an average slope of approximately 24.5%. This next slide indicates the topography. These are 5-foot contours, and if you see the tighter the contour, the steeper the slope. So it's really significant slopes in this part of the property. Here are some site photos. This is standing on 15, looking east through the property. This is on the southwest corner, looking east. This is on the south central property, looking northeast. This is on the south central property, also looking northeast, and this is looking north. This is standing on the center of the property, looking southwest. And here's the site photo on 15th Street, looking south at the entrance to the property. The last finding is finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. The city engineer has reviewed this and has indicated that the proposed R1 area is largely hillside, so therefore not much development is expected. The R17 area is 2 acres, which could generate approximately 225 trips per day or 21 trips during the PM peak hours. This estimated traffic was derived from the Land Use Code 220 for apartments in the ITE trip generation manual. The Streets and Engineering Department has no objection to this annexation. The proposed R1 zoning district is intended as a residential area that permits single-family detached housing at a density of 1 unit per gross acre. This district is intended for those areas of the city that are developed at the density or are preferably developed at this density because of factors such as vehicular access, topography, flood hazard, and landslide hazard. The R17 district is intended as a medium to high-density residential district that permits a mix of housing types at a density not greater than 17 units per acre. This district is for the establishment in those areas that are not suitable for lower density residential due to proximity to more intense types of land uses. This district is appropriate as a transition between low-density residential and commercial districts, or as a buffer between arterial streets and lower-density residential districts. Here's a land use map indicating the land uses. To the south is civic uses. We have Eagles Event Center and the city park, and to the west, we have Avista's offices and service yard, and some single-family uses to the north, single-family use to the east, and to the north, vacant natural area. There are 10 recommended conditions, items to be included in an annexation agreement. They're at the end of your staff report. I won't read them all. And the decision point tonight is the annexation of 5.9 acres in conjunction with zoning approval from County Ag Suburban to City R1 and R17 residential zoning districts. Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. That concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Mike. Go ahead, John.
Thanks, Mike. Good presentation, as always. So, a few questions that relate to the R1 portion. The recommendations for the annexation agreement hint that this may or may not be gifted to the city Parks Foundation, dedicated for a natural area or park. It says, in the event that it is gifted for public use, it kind of leaves it open. And in the other narrative that I read, it kind of suggests that if that doesn't happen, the applicant might pursue putting single family up in that steep area. So what can you share with us with regard to that?
As far as the parks negotiator, I'd like our parks representative to talk about that part, where they are within the negotiations. That's my understanding. They're still talking about it. I'm not aware of where they are with that. And as far as developing that into a single family, it'd be very difficult to be at the hillside and the slope is so high, and we have a condition of an 8% slope on the driveway. So
It's nearly undevelopable.
That's
To get a driveway
right.
up there to split that into some number
Right,
of
that's
lots,
correct.
it's almost undevelopable.
And we have a representative from the Parks Department again to talk about where they are with that open space.
But correct me, procedurally, with an annexation, we're not able to condition things. You know, we couldn't say, well, we approved this with a condition that, you know, the R1 portion is not, you know, must be gifted to the city or will not be developed, you know, into homes or whatever. We can't condition it like that.
You can make recommendations as far as for the annexation agreements, certain language, but not to gift it, but maybe to keep negotiations going.
Randy, you want to
Thank
add
you.
anything to that?
No, I think that's fair, and the commission's job in this application is just to determine zoning if council approves annexation. Planning Commission doesn't actually approve annexation or not. But yes, you can recommend conditions for an annexation agreement should council decide to do that.
But this application where if we, depending on which way we go, it is for annexation with an R1 and R17 zoning on the property.
You are approving the zoning.
Right. Okay.
and Council does the annexation.
All right, thank you.
Question, there isn't a distinct line between the R1 and the other property, R17. Is that because it can be adjusted depending on how they decide to develop this?
There
Because
is-
there's no firm line.
There is a distinct line, and it's
There is.
on the annexation map request. It's on,
Okay, because I'm not seeing on this.
let's see, page.
It's in there.
They're going to follow the existing boundary line
Okay.
to additional 36 feet and then do
Okay.
east.
All right,
So this is the exact,
the exact.
and it has
Okay.
the acres. This is
See
2
on the
acres.
topo. Okay,
That's on page 4 of your staff report.
Yep.
okay, got it.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe this needs to go to the attorney, I'm not sure. Can we recommend approval of R17 and not R1, and the annexation go forward?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, can we recommend approval of R17 and denial of R1 and the annexation still go forward?
You will eventually have to designate the zoning of any property that is annexed. The ordinances are unclear on that, but typically what we've done is establish the zoning first so that the applicant knows what he's getting into before he asks council to annex the property.
Yeah, but what he's saying is, could he leave out the R1 completely from annexation and just do the R17?
One parcel, I think. It's a single parcel, correct?
Yes.
It's a single parcel
So so we can't divide on a parcel.
no, you.
If they were
you're
two
faced-
parcels, maybe,
You're
right?
faced with an application for this parcel.
This request.
Right.
And we're just making recommendations to city council at this point. We could make a recommendation, I guess, but we can't make a recommendation to say, we recommend the annexation, but we want it all R17 in lieu of what's presented to us. Can that be a recommendation if it goes that way?
May I clarify? The R17, if you did that across the whole site, if they didn't split it, then you're getting more units. So I don't know if that's the intent, or if it's to shrink the area that would be annexed into the city. I guess that's something for the commission to
Okay.
consider. But they're asking to split it, recognizing the hillside portion of it, the steep slope, and that's why they're looking at the R1,
Right.
that portion of it.
Okay. We have a representative from the Parks Department here. Do you want to come on up and add anything that you might know about where you guys are on this before we bring the applicant up?
Good evening, Commissioners. Yes, we did meet a few
Just state your
times.
name and,
I'm Monty McCully with the Coeur d'Alene Parks Department.
Great,
I'm the
thank you.
Trails Coordinator. We have met with the developer a few times and discussed that portion of the hillside coming into natural open space. And in our Parks and Rec master plan, we have found that the public wants more open space. So we are interested in the parcel. It won't by itself do us a lot of good right now, but in the future, as other properties come forward and the possibility of getting open space from them, we might be able to make some kind of public access trails so people can use the hill. So it could be like the first piece that we get, kind of like how we got Tubbs Hill. It was one piece at a time. So right now, it's not a lot of good, but we are interested in it, and we are negotiating with the developer to have that come to us.
what other properties around that might be, I think we're all familiar with that area, what might be more for the Parks Department to look at to say we can add to this and make it accessible and
Well, we do have Cherry Hill Park down to the south, and we have this portion that we've referred to as Field of Dreams, because at one point it was going to be a baseball field. Now I think it might be pickleball courts. There's the Eagles property here. You do have one big lot of a single family, and then you have, I believe, a property that most of the hillside belongs to one owner. At some point in the future, some of these properties might decide to sell, develop, come forward like this particular annexation is, and say, hey, we want to split this up, we'll give this portion to the city, and this one might come in and say, hey, we'll give this portion, and at some point, we might get a connectivity from Best Hill over to Canfield, or to Cherry Hill, kind of connecting the dots as we go. So it's a first piece. There might never be more pieces, but it does have some value to the Parks Department.
And if nothing else, and I'm not saying it will or not, but if that piece just stays the way it is and this is approved and they annex it in and they develop the R17, it's kind of a landlocked piece right now. It's just going to be something that hopefully the city has and we
Yeah,
can connect
yes.
to it.
And that is something that we can negotiate with the developer, this portion that my mouse is on now, because right now it's landlocked. We would have to have some kind of access to that parcel. It couldn't just be landlocked that the public couldn't access.
And that access would be more of a walking access, not a vehicle access.
That's correct.
Okay. Any, go ahead, Peter.
A question, it's or a comment, and I don't expect you necessarily to answer it, Monty. It's sort of like tax law, it's in the eyes of the beholder. But there's two ways, I think, that a property owner can provide property for public use. One is to the city, donate to the city in some fashion. Another is to a foundation. And I think that there's some specific differences and maybe advantages to the property owner to do one over the other. And there may be advantages to the city to have one done over the other.
That's correct.
I think that we as a group cannot pass something contingent upon a property owner giving property to the city. I don't think, but nevertheless, there's two different group ways to do it, and there's advantages to both. I don't know how familiar, well, I know I'm not, the person that was most familiar with us with that talked to me many times, but he's no longer with the city. So I assume that Doug passed that wisdom on to others. But the foundation donation may also be an advantage, may be an advantage to the property owner that far exceeds the advantages giving it to the city, but still meets our needs. I think
Yes.
you're a compliment to be working on this.
Yeah, we probably would give it to the Parks Foundation. Some of those advantages are if we apply for an LWCF grant in the future, we can use that property belonging to the foundation to leverage grants. So if we ever want to put hiking trails and that sort of thing, we can apply for grants by having that property belong to the Parks Foundation.
So that's part of your criteria when you go through this. You think of foundation participation. Thank you very much.
Good. Phil?
I have a question of Mike when he finished.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. That's it? All right, thank you. I'll appreciate it. We have Gordon.
Mr. Chairman, did you?
I'm
was
sorry?
Commissioner Ward asking to
Oh.
speak to Mike Harry, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you wanted Mike to come back up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike, I should have asked earlier.
Yeah.
And just for clarification, if property is annexed, therefore it is provided utility service, water, sewer, and so on. If it's not annexed, they do not have that at the present time, is that correct?
That is correct.
So even if the Parks Department got the property and wanted to put a bathroom facility that required water and sewer, they would really need the public utilities, which requires the annexation?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And wouldn't we, Mike, before you go, I'm sorry. And if that's the case, if they wanted to put that bathroom on there, wouldn't we need that easement, some sort for the utilities,
Yeah,
as well
if
as the easement to get to that property? And
Yes.
how does that all work
If
out?
you look at condition, let's see, 7, it talks about the easement and the access to that property. So
Okay.
recommendation number 7 talks about that.
But
So
at-
it's already part of
The condition.
one of the recommended.
But at this
agreement
point,
items.
if this, it was stated before, it hasn't been determined, even though the Parks Department is interested in it, but it hasn't been determined by the developer yet, whether or not that's going
Right, because
to be
in number
given
7,
or.
it says in the event.
In the event.
of, yes.
All right, and I
that's
guess
correct.
we'll let Gordon come up and
Clarify.
clarify that cloud.
Okay, thank you.
All right, come on up, Gordon. State your name, your address, and I'll swear in.
Gordon Dobler, Dobler Engineering, representing Aspen Homes, Hayden.
Do you affirm that your testimony will be true and correct?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. So let's just get to the fun part right away, the R1. So when you annex, you have to annex with the zone. R1 is the city's least dense zone. If they had something else, we would have approached that. And the bottom line is that R1 piece is really undevelopable for many, many reasons. It's water. You can't get water to it because it's outside, it's above the city's pressure zone. It's higher than that. It's 130 feet higher. So we would have, you couldn't even put a booster pump. Can't put a well in because the city, when you annex, requires that we use their water. The grades are too steep for driveways. So really the only use for it is a public use. it's a little bit ironic and interesting that you guys have touched on all the issues that go along with giving it to the city that we haven't finalized yet. So that's the reason that we need to can finish our discussions with the city, but we're very interested if the city wants to take it as a dedicated piece. We think that's a great idea. The other option would be retain it as open space, but then it would have to be privately maintained, and it would be, I don't know that it would be open to public use, but it makes more sense for it to be used by the public. It's such a big piece. So that's the intent as we move forward. We simply haven't had time to work out all the details with the easements and what parks might want or what the city might want if we move forward to dedicate them if we get annexed. But that would be the intent. So I just want to assure you that it's not, I know you guys struggle with, when you come in and zone it, you can hear a lot of, plans and good wishes, but, once the horse is out of the barn, R1 is R1. Well, it's really not the case here because it's undevelopable for many reasons. So we'll pursue the discussions and negotiations with the city, but we fully intend to have that, I believe, agreed on before we get to city council, should we get annexed. So that's the R1 part of it. The R17, well, let me jump back to the utilities, because that's an easy one also. They're all in 15th Street, water and sewer are all there, easily accessible. The site fronts 15th Street. We would be required to improve or possibly fees in lieu of for 15th Street when we develop, certainly at building permit, we would do that. I know there's a greater project to improve 15th Street, so we'd work with the city to do whatever they want to do our improvements along our property. The R17, if you look at, I'm looking at page 5 of the staff report, when you look at the surrounding zoning, we think the R17 is a good fit for the surrounding zoning. The city's property to the south is an R17. You've got a vista across the street that's a C17 and a portion of a vista that's R17. Even some of the single-family uses on 15th Street, the other side, are R12 and R17. So yes, the existing use is single-family, but in today's market, it's just a matter of time. They can be developed as an R17. When you go further up 15th Street, you see some of those developments, the creek side that's got the fourplexes right next to the road, and then Aspen did just another development there off of Latitude, and that's I'm not sure what the zoning is, but it's a multifamily development. And in fact, it's probably fairly similar to the product they're looking at to put on this property, upscale multifamily. So we think the R17 is appropriate. The facilities are there, the utilities are there, and again, we recognize that depends on what parks might want to do with it. We certainly would have no problem granting an easement across our piece, extending water, within reason. So we want to accommodate that. Again, we need a little time with parks to sort it out and what they do need. Really, those are the highlights of it. Again, the type of product would be, it would be very similar to what went in on 15th Street, just up the road. Traffic is, assuming we could get 34 units on there. Peak hour, you're one car every 3 minutes. 15th Street's a collector. It's going to be improved, upgraded, so it can handle the traffic for the R17. I think that about covers it. We did go through the conditions. Well, they're not conditions. They would be recommendations to be included in an annexation agreement. We understand that. And we certainly don't have any objections, kind of expected these issues to follow an annexation agreement. But there was one that I think is in error. It's number 2. Says the project will need to maintain a private service easement along the southern edge of the property to 1802. Well, 1802 accesses across the Eagles flag lot, not ours. Here, I don't know if I can use the mouse to point to it, right here. So here's 1802 is right there. They access on this driveway right here, not on our property. So I'm not seeing that we would provide any easement to 1802. Other than that, there you have it.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Gordon. With respect to the R1 portion, it is pretty steep. It doesn't look very developable. There's one picture in here, you get more of a 3D look,
Yeah.
drone's view, and it almost looks like some rock outcropping and this and that. But just to be sure, if condition 6, if you have it in front of you there, it's not condition, recommendation 6, rather.
Right.
If we were to add a sentence there that read something like this, you add a sentence before number 6 there that says that the R1 parcel remain open space in perpetuity, period, and then it goes on to say continue working with the city. So if the continuing with the city doesn't pan out, the first sentence that it stays open gives us all a warm and fuzzy that we're not going to see big houses pop up there or something like that. Would that be amenable?
Yeah, we don't have any objection to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Gordon, I have a question. Regarding 6 and 7, why wasn't it worked out prior to coming here so we wouldn't be having this conversation right now about if it would or if it wouldn't, even though we just make a recommendation and you guys kind of like, yeah, we worked it out already and we might have a different 6 or 7 in there. How come it hasn't worked out? Put it that way.
We had a short discussion with Parks Department in the pre-app meeting and suggested some of this, and that was the last discussion I remember.
Oh.
So, and even at that time, it wasn't clear that the Parks Director was open to having it dedicated to the city. So I think everybody's just been busy and hasn't had a ton of time to discuss it.
Okay. Further questions?
I want to talk to Mike
Oh,
real
what?
quick.
Who has?
Well, I
okay.
guess on
Mike
number,
consider it.
number 2 that he pointed out, does somebody from the city want to confirm if that's where the utilities are?
Regarding that,
What was the question?
The utilities servicing 1802 North 15th, are they in the flag lot there?
are you
or-
talking number 2, Sarah?
Yeah, number 2, suggestion number 2. Just want to make sure we have the correct location of the utilities servicing that lot.
That's not access easement, that's a service easement, either
Okay.
water or wastewater. And I'll have to go back and check their exact staff comments on that. But
Okay.
it's being serviced by one of those.
Mike, can you stay there for a sec? Maybe you know what's going on 15th, but if this is an R17 and you have 34 units, you have kids, and they're probably coming down from Dalton. And my question is, there are no crosswalks until you get up to Brad Best. There's no dedicated way for those kids to get across the street safely. Should we, as a city, look at doing something to make sure that we have some sort of a stop mechanism so those kids can safely cross? You can't expect that they're going to pull into each one of these 34 unit, but this is long. I mean, you don't get another stop until you get way past the freeway. So,
That is a good point. I know the city engineer's got some plans for
and
this
even a
area.
left-hand turn lane, there's no dedicated central turn lane here. I mean, it does concern me. You just don't want to put kids up against some people in a rush to get to the freeway.
Good
So,
point.
okay.
Any more questions for Gordon? Oh, Phil, go ahead.
A couple of comments. First, I appreciate your frankness. The R1 really doesn't have much use, but at the same time, it's there, and I understand that. Let me ask you, the access to the property of the R17, does that come off that street to the south, or are you providing, would you be, I know you're not in the site planning stage right now, but how someone get in and out of their property?
So, a very good question. Right now, we would have to come off of 15th Street.
Right.
But we've already approached the Eagles to see if we can enter into some partnership to share this driveway with them. So we're pursuing that. We think it makes more sense, less access is onto 15th Street. We think it's kind of a win-win. We can participate in maintenance or whatever with Eagles. So that's our goal, but I can't stand here and say we've finished those negotiations, but we've certainly started them, and they were at least open to discussion on that. But we'll pursue that until they say no, and
So
if
that
they
is
won't let us do
private
it.
access that the Eagles controls, is that right?
Yeah, they actually own this piece right here.
Well, I know they have a small parcel up.
Yeah, they've got, this
northeast
is
of
their
you.
piece here, there's their gazebo.
I thought that was Cherry Hill Park at that
No,
location.
this is the Eagles gazebo
That's
right
the
here.
Eagle, okay. Okay. I'll be honest, as far as the R-17, I don't have a problem with that. The density and so on, to me, is not a problem. At first glance, I thought, you gotta be kidding me, because I looked at the aerial and you see all these houses. But realistically, the property, it really is gonna be setting a precedent. You really can't go any further east with it. You're pretty much there. There's a public park right next door. There's a fire station next door. So if you have a apartment building, that's ideal for kids and protection of the property. And you're pretty close to Interstate 90.
Right.
So between 90, if someone needs to get out of town, or Apple or Best further to the north, I feel like it's really pretty well located for that type of zoning. I guess the only thing I'd be concerned about, if anything we did here, and the ability of the city to acquire that R1 will result in an increased cost to the city that may not be there today. And I guess that'd be up to Aspen Homes. You guys would be the owner of the property.
Yeah, again, the increased cost to the city would be,
If you can't develop the R1
yeah,
and you decide to convey it to the city, is that going to be a conveyance, here it is, or is it going to be, it has a value, I'm sure it does, but are we giving it more value if in fact we approve the application here? And that would be my concern, that this only serves as a means for you to get more money out of that property, although I don't object to the
oh, I see.
R-17 at all.
That's very crafty, more crafty than us, I think.
I'm from Miami.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, again, it has to be zoned something, and R1 is your least dense, so, yeah. But I don't know that that'd be the case, and I know Troy, he's not really gonna wanna pay for anything, so we're going into this eyes open.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No more questions of Gordon at this time? Okay, I'll have you back. Oh, come on back up, Marty.
I just wanted to address Commissioner Fleming's
Sure.
worry about the kids getting out on the 15th Street. The engineering department has been working for several years to improve 15th Street by widening it, adding curbs, adding bike lanes, and adding bike pedestrian multi-use paths. So that'll get people in and out safely from the development north to the cross light at Best. So if they're going in that direction, they'll be able to get up to a safe crossing. We've had some problems happening, but
So winters, that's a long hike in the winter. So hopefully we'll develop the bus stop, some integrated.
Right, and that's something we can bring up with engineering too, if we want a crosswalk somewhere
Yeah.
mid-range that makes it
Maybe a
safer.
turning lane too by the time we get to this.
What's that?
There's no central turning lane here. If you're coming from
Right.
the north from Dalton with your kids in the car and you gotta turn left, you stop traffic.
Right, and I don't know the plans as far as if there's gonna be a turn lane or not. I know there will be, the road is wide and it's gonna be wider, and it's gonna have bike lanes and paths, and it might have turn lanes. That'd be a question for Chris Bosley. But
Can't lose sight of it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I have Lynn Cope Fairbrook wants to come up.
Do you mind if that stays up there?
Excuse me?
Do you mind if that stays up there? So
Oh,
I
no,
can
that's
use that
fine.
as a
No, I
reference
just
point?
need to, do you affirm that your testimony will be true and correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Lynn Fulbrook, and this is my husband, Terry Fulbrook. We actually share a property line with the proposed project, which inadvertently wasn't actually mentioned. So if you notice right here, this is actually our house. And it is not zoned R17, it's zoned R3. So I wanted to point that out as a distinction. We are definitely in opposition to rezoning the property at 1808 North 15th Street from agricultural to R17, and also recommending that there be no variance to the potential rezoning allowed, and I'm going to explain the reasons why. We've owned our property proudly for 17 years and purchased this home because of the land, the space, and location. As you can see, the forest edge right there. We didn't choose to live in a subdivision, and we don't really want that for ourselves. This is our investment. We're older. This is our retirement. And as you know, traffic noise can have a significant effect on property value. And research shows that a home located adjacent to a busy road may sell for 8 to 10% less when compared to one located along a quiet neighborhood street. And while we understand that building happens, gosh, we've seen a lot. We've been here for 28 years. I came as an educator to this area. But we believe that a multi-level structure is not in keeping with this particular forest area and will devalue and depreciate our property and home, as well as have major environmental impacts. This project comes with some risk to our natural resources, and as we've all noted, the land behind us right here is undevelopable. I mean, you can't even walk up the steepness of the incline behind our house. And our back door is about 20 feet to the property line. We know that, the risks to the natural resources, specifically our local water table and aquifer, I mean, those are areas of concern. And the green agricultural space that exists at 1808 should be protected. I mean, we really feel that, we're losing a lot of green space in our community. And that exhibits, our greenhouse gases. And research also shows that building a typical 2-bedroom house produces 80 tons of carbon dioxide emissions, which is equal to the emissions of about 5 new cars. Protecting our ecosystem should be paramount when projects and building developments are considered in our area, and it's the responsibility of our city's planning commissioners to ensure that wildlife habitat, which we see a lot of, our water resources, forest land and grassland are preserved because they provide important public benefits, which you all addressed earlier in previous presentations. I would like to ask what sun and shade studies have been done for this rezoning, as the height of the proposed structures that we read will impact the light to our home and garden areas, and how this development will protect living conditions on our property, including privacy, solar access, and general livability conditions. We have trees that line our property right here, right on the borderline. And so by building a large structure, they're going to be impacted by that shade. We have also a massive ponderosa pine here that you can't even see the top of it. And there are limbs that overhang the property and probably have done that for over hundreds of years. And we're worried about root damage and loss as construction would begin. We'd like to know what considerations have been made to identify the height, setbacks, step back, screens, and buffers to mitigate the impacts of this large-scale development, because we're definitely concerned about having the R17 next door. But we're most concerned about the impact of traffic on 15th Street. And I question the information that was presented before you, because I am one that travels and commutes on and off the exit 14 ramps daily as my commute. And so I know the usage firsthand.
And I'm proposing that the city conduct a traffic impact assessment to ensure that this new development does not cause excessive delay on nearby roads and increase transportation emissions due to idling. The average household owns 2 vehicles in this area and makes an average of 2.24 trips per day. It's not 1 vehicle going by every 3 minutes. I guarantee you that. 15th Street is a single-lane road and is already a busy access point to the freeway for people, and you can't see it in this photo, but it's there, and it's difficult for people to get to the freeway because they're coming from the downtown area, the Crestline subdivision, as well as Dalton Gardens and Hayden to get on to the freeway. There's also another large housing development right behind the freeway back here that's in development, parcels 3723 and 3163. And these residents will also be utilizing these same exits. So I just wanted to point out the implications for traffic in the area. And this clear cutting has already been occurring. With development improvements to Cherry Hill Park, we have already seen an increase in traffic and people to the area. And I don't want to overlook the fact, it's already been mentioned, that the Eagles Pavilion has lots of outdoor events through the spring and fall. And as Aspen Homes is potentially asking to build on, and now we have a little bit more clarity around what's actually being proposed, 34 units is cramming a lot of people into that development without, I didn't hear clarity around what the road access would be. And so we're interested in knowing more about those developments. But what I can tell you is that Aspen did do a multi-structure unit further down on Best Avenue and 15th. And when you look at that, most people are parking out on the street because that's what you see when you drive by. So they're already adding to our congested 15th Street. So we really want you to consider what are the plans for parking and road access to the property and how many additional access points will be needed. Trying to turn left onto 15th because it doesn't have one of those medians is almost impossible at peak times for myself. And as you can note here, we have 2 main services that provide essential services to our community. Yeah, they can be a benefit, right, to have the fire station, but the fire station, guess what? They also need to get out to be able to do what they need to do. The fire trucks go by daily across our property, and I don't think it really requires an explanation as to why we shouldn't add a multi-level unit next to a fire station or a Vista Utilities. And I see that they're not here today because, but I do want to point out that sadly our neighbor Dale Woodard died recently, and his property right here, even though it shows that it's zoned R, it's owned by a Vista. And so is this parcel right here. So Avista has intentions of developing this, and so I just want to also point out they own parcels 744 A and B, and what are the long-range plans to accommodate this development? We need utilities, right? We need housing, but we also need the utilities to go along with it. So they're going to be expanding, and I'm not sure that a concentrated housing development fits with this forecast. And so in our opinion, the magnitude of this development does not belong in this busy area, and we hope that the city's planning commissioners will consider our concerns, because you can see we're kind of on our own, right? We don't have a lot of people around us, and consider the request that I've brought forward to deny the request to rezone 1808 North 15th Street to R17 and R1 because of the impacts that I mentioned. It's not in the best interest of the community and current residents, and moving forward, we would like to be advised of all proposals affecting this property. And one final comment. You talked about the housing needs of essential workers. You're looking at one. I've been an educator for 28 years. And I've supported public education for all of those years. And you guys, I have no desire to live in a high-density housing complex. Some of us do want that grass and that green space because our lives are busy and hectic supporting young children and our youth and the betterment of our communities. So I just wanted to shed light on that as I heard the rest of the testimonies and proposals this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't leave. Ma'am,
Yes.
Lynn?
don't leave.
Yes.
A couple observations.
Yes.
First of all, thank you, as our chairman said earlier, thanks for people coming to testify. What's facing this planning and zoning is one item, and that is, these people the property owner wants to annex to the city. The city has to approve the annexation. Before the city wants to consider the annexation, they want to know what the zoning will be. So they ask us, what would we designate the zoning? So we go through a rigmarole, and, well, you heard it, how
Yeah.
the property is, and we make that decision. We don't make the decision. The items you are talking about are very critical and heartfelt and very important. The council's the one that you need to talk to when that comes up. And I'm sure you've got practice and you will do a good job. But that is the group that needs to listen to it and makes a decision. All we're doing is saying, if you accept the annexation city, this is the zoning it should be. Now, you're outside the zoning, that's correct? I mean, you're outside the city.
No, she's in
You're inside the city?
There are,
the line.
there are
These
three,
are R3 right next to them.
R3.
one parcel.
So you
R3.
are in the city, okay,
We're right here.
okay.
And
Now,
so you can,
is that whole parcel yours?
yes,
Okay.
2.1 acres.
How many?
2.1 acres. And ours is doesn't have as much slope. Most of the slope exists like from this property line and goes straight up. I've tried to hike that a few times.
Secondly, the property across the street, whether it's a Vista or not, it's zoned in some fashion.
Yep,
Whoever
residential
owns
at the
that property, they can develop that property as directed, as permitted in that zoning they have. So if a Vista's acquired it, they can do the same thing with it that the prior property owner could do. If a Vista wants to do something else, a different zoning, they have to come back before us, you'll be notified and whatnot, so you'll have an opportunity to speak on that part too.
Yes, thank you.
That was a very articulate presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have a person from Avista here who's on the sign-up sheet. And Todd Kisberry from Avista, I don't know, Todd, are you still here or did he leave? I guess he left because he did not wish to speak, but okay. Gordon, you want to come back up and address anything you heard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gordon Dobler, Dobler Engineering.
You're welcome.
So, yeah, there was a lot there. I guess I would start by saying, to a great extent, we would share some of the concerns about traffic on 15th Street. We would love for the city to complete their plan to upgrade that. I do know that it will have a center turn lane. It'll be 2 through lanes, a north and south with a center turn lane. And as Monty said, there'll be pedestrian facilities on this side of the road, a multi-use, 10-foot wide multi-use path for pedestrian connectivity when it gets built. If we end up building our portion of it, of course, that will be there when we finish the improvements. But ultimately, that's the plan. So when it gets built, then it can increase the capacity for traffic north and south. Again, with the intent of reducing impacts to traffic, we would like to share the access with the Eagles. That's the intent of pursuing that. There's no guarantee that we'd get it, but at least we recognize that and are trying to do that. Preservation of the natural habitat. Well, I guess I would think ultimately preserving 4 out of 6 acres in its natural state would more than accomplish that goal. So again, the R17, we don't have a site plan where we could assess the impacts on the neighbors, but it will have to conform to the site performance standards for the R17. That's what we can say about that, so.
Depending on how this goes through and whatever recommendation it makes to city council and whatever they do on that R17, you will develop it. And you have not a plan, but I'm sure
A thought.
the developer has a plan of what they're going to be doing on that piece of property, and I'm sure they have somewhat of a good idea where it might be, I take it, on that piece of property. And I would have to assume that it's similar project to, which was completed north, apartments, single garages, two-story, so on and so on. Okay, just want a little clarity on that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we could state the obvious, that if we're pursuing access, shared access with Eagles, the units are gonna be close to that access. I mean, that, I wanna say it goes without saying, but it would be fairly certain that the development was gonna center around the access. That much we know in concept.
All right. In regard to the parking statement that Lynn made, and maybe staff can address this, I know they have parking close to the best in that area. I'm not sure, is parking on 15th Street on that side even now available or not?
I think now it is, but it's definitely going away with the
Yeah.
improvements to 15th
So
Street. And we did
eventually, when 15th
talk
is
to the applicant
developed,
that
parking is
need to
going
make
to be
sure
gone.
there's adequate parking within the project. I mean, the project met it, but there's clearly a desire of the residents to park on the street for whatever
Okay.
reason.
So that is a little bit of an anomaly. That portion of 15th Street was constructed extra wide. The rest of 15th Street isn't going to be that wide, and there won't be parking on 15th Street when it's finished. There'll be, I believe there's still plans to put a bike lane in there, but not, it'd be a through lane, so there's not going to be parking on 15th Street.
Right.
There isn't now in this area. I think up north, again, they're taking advantage of the anomaly where there's that wider road to park on 15th Street. But that won't be the case here, short-term or long-term.
All right. Any other questions? Nope. All right, thanks, Gordon.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close public testimony on this and bring it to discussion for the commission. Go ahead, John.
I'd start some discussion, and I'd like to point out, if we look at this map up here, I'll call it a tale of two parcels. You know, currently the R17 property, if you will, has a single-family home on it, just like the parcel to the north of that. The parcel to the north of that is in the city. The parcel to the south of that is out in the county. They're both single-family houses. What I'm getting at is, you know, that's a lot that's screaming to be in the city. You know, it's like these donut holes, we've called them, or whatever, that exist out there. So you know, who plows that street? Who sweeps that street? Who fixes the potholes? Both of those houses benefit from city services, is what I'm saying. You know, they both have the ability to walk down to Monty's new pickleball courts or whatever they do down there or whatnot. So they use the park. I'm saying that county lot that has that single-family house is a quasi-city dwelling or whatever. It looks like it's in the city. It acts like it's in the city. It's freeloading, if you will, getting free city services, whatever. That parcel, in my mind, kind of belongs in the city. So I'm not arguing that it should be R17 or whatever, but it belongs in the city, is an argument. Another argument would be, you know, as a benefit of this is, you know, we talk all day long about the need for housing and affordable housing. And we know that, you know, collector streets, arterials are the logical place for more housing. We're hurting for housing. So if we're looking for positives for this thing, you know, it's a lot that really begs to be in the city in the first place. We need more housing stock for people that can afford it. And the other positive is that it does bring open space. I think, as Mr. Dobler acknowledged, we could not condition this thing, but suggest that that the annexation stipulate that the R1 parcel remain open space in perpetuity, period. Whether or not the parks thing pans out or not, it would stay open. That's a positive. So there's some real positives to this.
Thanks, Sean. Further discussion, comments? Well, then if, make a comment, yeah, I, as I pointed out, 6 and 7, yeah, I would have liked to seen it more confirmed than just maybes, but I guess that'll be something when it goes to city council. I guess we'll see where that is, and I'll ask a question to staff. Would those 6 and 7, Hillary, have to be confirmed and agreed upon before it goes to city council? Or is it it'll be the same thing if we make this recommendation to go forward with these conditions as they are? Those two can be the same.
If there are further discussions before this goes to city council, it would be refined. So we would refine the conditions. If they've come to an agreement, that would change.
But if it isn't, it would go to city council just as it is
Correct.
right now.
Yep, and if there's any change to the condition language as
Right.
presented.
And when would this go to city council approximately? You have an idea?
Generally, it goes the following month and 1 week later. So it would be the second meeting of the month.
Okay. Okay, those are my two concerns.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
there's just a lot of unknowns between the R1 and also the easement, the possibility of the easement and the way the frontages are sitting. To me, there's just too many unknowns on this one. I wish I knew that, yes, the Eagles say yes, and we'll take people in on the side of this and stay away from the adjacencies. I wish we had more certainty on the R1. I feel like there's not enough, there's too many holes in this. It's Swiss cheese right now. And I'm not convinced that we've got enough on the table to make a good determination for the city. I agree, it's a donut hole, but do we have enough answers on this current presentation to take it to city? I just feel like it's a little too Swiss cheesy.
And another comment, I agree, we talked, and John said affordability, and I'm sure these would be rental units, and I have no idea what affordable rent is in that area. I know I've driven down 15th Street, and I'm pretty sure the other project that was done is full, and there's cars, single cars, and they have parking on the property, and I'm sure that's what's gonna have to be required when it gets to that point, but, I feel that, as Commissioner Fleming said, there's a little, not clarity here for me. Other comments before we ask for a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a comment.
Sure.
I really understand what the homeowners are saying. I mean, it is a concern. They see apartments coming next to them, but I look at the property across streets of Vista, and we look at the actual underlying zoning. Oh, they could be demolished next year and have apartments all around them. And I just feel like that R17, maybe a little higher than I'd like, but it's the proper zoning for that location on a major roadway about to be expanded. It has services, and it has to be zoned something if it's going to be annexed. So, although I recognize there are some problems at the same time, I feel like part of the site planning process, they come in to actually get a permit, there are controls there. And if their property is designated for open space, then it certainly doesn't give it much value to a reason to develop it. I just feel like as far as a recommendation, we should go forward and recommend it. That'd be my conviction.
And to add again a little bit, again, it's great that the city might get a piece of property, and whether it's going to be usable or not, again, it's a little cloud for me on the conditions 6 and 7, regardless of what we might change those conditions to. So I'd have to say I couldn't support this at this time. So that being said, if there's no more comments.
Well, I'd like to make
Go
a
ahead.
comment. I wish this was, instead of how many acres is it, I wish it was multiplied by 100. As then it would really get the point. It's a good example of the difference between the building codes in the city and the county. And we talk about open space, et cetera, and a lot of that is directed by what the building codes are. And the county, it requires more, space than the city. And I think this is, I don't want to say, is a very good example of what we as a community are facing on annexations. And I've said what I wanted to say, and thank you very much.
Okay.
I guess I'd be curious, I mean, I think it is a donut hole in the city and should, probably be within the city. I mean, we have an R1 and R17, and there's not much discussion for the in-between. And you do see R12, I think there's an R8, a little bit up from there, and R3 right next door. So, maybe there's some discussion for some particular zoning for the in-between. And I don't know what that looks like.
I'm guessing this is driven by, they bought a big chunk of land and they can only develop so much of it, so they're maximizing their profit on that little strip rather than the big piece. So I'm sure they're looking at the balance
Sure,
sheets
yeah.
first and foremost.
John, you had some more comments? Or you
I
wanna make
just, one more turn on this question mark thing of the R1, is I'm suggesting that regardless of whether, the applicant and the city have come to us with a completed, definitive deal, you heard Mr. Dobler say he would agree, or that he'd be comfortable with a statement that says that we would add the words in here that the annexation agreement stipulate that the R1 parcel remain open space in perpetuity, period. So there it is. And then from there, it goes on and says, continue to explore with the city, da-da-da-da-da-da. And if the city, da-da-da-da, doesn't come through, it still stays open in perpetuity. He's nodding his head in acknowledgement back there. So, what I'm hearing here in this room is that the benefit to the city is assuming that the council would agree with that language that we would modify in here, that locks up the R1. Gordon's nodding his head, yes. So, I mean, we're hearing the applicant going, yeah, we're never going to build anything up there. So, anyway, I don't think there's anything more certain than that.
So do we take out 6, 7, and 8 and not have so much wordage there and just say it'll be
I
open
think
space
you
in
leave it in there.
perpetuity?
I think you leave it in there for the color commentary that, we know we're exploring that and everything else, but we just add that word that you lead number 6 with the statement that the annexation agreement stipulate that the R1 parcel remain open space in perpetuity, period, and then it says continue, et cetera, meaning if the continue blah, blah, blah doesn't pan out, it still stays open space. I think that's... Any issues with adding those kind of words?
I would
or
like
making
to see that
a
added. I guess so if the property is annexed, does the city council get separate choices, I guess, on the annexation and then our recommendation for zoning? Or are they two separate votes, I guess is what I'm asking? Is that how that
There's
works?
not two separate votes, but the planning commission really needs to, whatever your decision is, it needs to address what the zoning should be, if R17 and R1 is appropriate or not.
So our recommendation to city council is the annexation and the two zonings that, as presented to us, we make a recommendation that we recommend the annexation with the R1 and R17 as presented to us. Is that what I'm hearing or
No,
not?
The job of the planning commission is to establish zoning. So you basically assume if this property comes into the city, what should it be zoned?
Right.
You're not making you're not making a recommendation to council to annex or not. You're just making a decision as to what the property should be zoned if council annexes it. Now, council can also change that as well. The proposal is R1 and R17, but that's a proposal. It's your decision as to what it should come in as.
So I'm just proposing, so if you said that it should be annexed in the city, we feel like they're using city services, it makes sense for this, and it's one parcel, to be annexed into the city, but we would recommend it being annexed in at R3 as the neighboring lot, then that applicant can come back and request a zone change with more of their details figured out. Would that be a possibility?
So you wouldn't, so the zoning wouldn't be in effect until annexation. So your recommendation would go to council, and then they would decide if R3 is appropriate, or if the R17 or something is more appropriate. And at the time of annexation, then it gets assigned the zoning.
Okay.
So as it states here, basically, a request for zoning prior to annexation. So we are making a recommendation to city
Right,
council for this
but 2
zoning.
years down the road, if the applicant wanted to come request a zone change, that is possible. Or whenever they have their site plan more defined, you know.
Or
that's
we propose an R12 that drops it down to 24 units as
Right.
opposed to 34.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
That's our
Lots
next
of-
drop down, right?
Lots of options.
Right. that
R12.
is.
They've chosen an R17, and the next drop down would be an R12,
Right.
24 units.
And so the applicant also has the option, so just theoretically, you come in with a lower zone, they go to council, council agrees it should be a lower zoning. They could say, well, we don't really want to be annexed
don't
with that
wanna build
zoning.
it.
So they wouldn't proceed with the annexation agreement or ordinance, but,
Right.
so, but if it did, yes, then they could come back in the future potentially and ask for a zone change.
Correct. So the opportunity could still exist when more details were complete. And if that, yeah, I'm just suggesting something that might be somewhere in between, so.
Okay. Further discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
On a recommendation, do we have a whole list of things we need to say it complies with, or simply the order conclusion decision is specified on page 4?
To work through the whole findings worksheet,
Right.
What's that?
the whole findings
Gotta go
worksheet, all of
through
the findings.
this,
Yeah.
page
There
one,
there are 4 findings that
Yeah.
council has to address.
Yeah.
I would float a motion here, I guess.
Okay.
See how it goes. A2-22 is a matter that's come before the Planning Commission on March 8th, 2022, and there being present a person requesting approval of item A2-22, a request for zoning prior to annexation from County Ag Suburban to City R1 and R17, applicant being Aspen Homes and Development LLC, location 1801 North 15th Street, and we would make the findings as follows: B1 through B7, statements of background facts in our worksheet as written. B8, that the proposal is in conformance with the comp plan, supported by 1.12, enhancing existing urban areas and discouraging urban sprawl. B, objective 1.14, efficiency objective in utilization of existing infrastructure. Goal 3, objective 3.08, new housing that meets city need for income, for housing at various income levels. Objective 3.10, workforce housing supports that goal. B8, finding that the public facilities and utilities are available and adequate for proposed use, sewer, water, street system, police, fire, everybody's supported this proposal with no objections. That's as documented on page 13 and 14 of the staff report, and we heard that in the presentation. B10, 10, that the physical characteristics of the site make it suitable for the request at this time, that, as we've seen, the portions of the parcel that's R1 is anticipated to be undeveloped by all means, and the portion that is to be R17 has topography and such that do not pose significant constraints. B11, the proposal would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and existing land uses. The city engineer has attested to the fact that the traffic generated by an R17 here would not significantly create traffic issues, and that the proposed zoning fits the development pattern that Mike pointed out, as you see on both sides of the street, up and down 15th there. So with a conclusion, the Planning Commission pursuant for the aforementioned finds that the request for Aspen Homes and Development LLC for zoning prior to annexation in the application should be, we recommend approval with the 10 suggested provisions for inclusion in the annexation agreement. And I would propose that number 6 begins with a sentence that reads, quote, that the annexation agreement stipulate that the R1 parcel remain open space in perpetuity.
I think I have a first. I have a second.
I'll second the motion.
Or first and second.
Mr. Chairman, speaking to the motion,
Yes?
I sort of view this, I'm going to support it. And I'm supporting it because I believe, I'm looking at it as just a zone change. And if you look at the surrounding areas, it is C17 and R17. On the other side of the road, it's R17 and R12. Above this one is R3. It would seem to me that there's a natural progression that this corridor is going to be upzoned over time to R17, clear up to Best, and maybe even further. And that, if R3 comes before us as an R17, it would be natural for me, would be to approve that too at some time. Because I think it's just marching up the road. So anyway, I support this and will certainly vote in favor.
Okay, I'll call for a roll call in a minute. And again, as I stated, I would have to not support this. Not that I don't think the zoning is a problem or anything. It's just the one condition now, even though John said, in perpetuity, I'd rather see more clarity on my end, and that's just my feel. So I'll call for roll call, Shannon.
Fleming,
No.
Ingalls,
Yes.
McCracken,
No.
Lutrip,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Messina.
No.
Uh-oh. 3 and 3.
So then it fails, right?
It fails.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need more clarity. I'm just not feeling comfortable. It's too many unknowns,
So
maybe. Yeah.
as the motion has moved to held,
I think the discussion was
client-
very good, and it's excellent.
Can certainly come back. Just-
and Hillary, is there anything on the appeal side of this particular hearing that,
Continue on, I'm not sure, right? So it goes with the recommendation. I mean, it's going to show that it failed because it was a split vote.
Right.
So, but it continues on, unlike the zone change that they'd have to appeal to continue to city council, unless Randy is aware of a different provision of the code on the,
I don't know, I think they
Fails.
can appeal the zone and take the annexation to council.
okay?
Okay.
Or the applicant can refile and
Right,
provide additional information.
Okay,
okay.
thank
That-
you.
That being said, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have First, second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Motion is adjourned.
That one was unanimous.